All right. I am live. There we go. I'm for sure now live. I know I'm a few minutes early, but I didn't really notice that I was sending the invite stuff out on social media 10 minutes early. So figured why not just go ahead and dive in early. But yeah, getting ready to go get started here on episode 28. So let's go ahead and hit the intro and get started.
He who is ashamed of his geekery has forgotten the face of Stan Lee.
This is the podcast, Geekery Abides.
Hello and welcome to Geekery Abides, episode number 28. I am, of course, Tad, your host, and ready to kick it off. I mentioned on the YouTube side a second ago that I am starting a tiny bit early, but I was a little negligent in posting the social media blasts a little earlier than normal, so figured dive in a little early. Why not? Plenty of nerdery to discuss. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive right in. Hello, Mike, and Mike in the chat said, "Game over, man, game over." That's obviously a great reference to the main topic for sure. So let me go ahead and jump on over first to the emails. If you want to email the show, you can do that by shooting me an email directly, which is Tad, T-A-D-D, at geekeryabides.com. Again, Tad at geekeryabides.com. That is the way to email the show. Whether you have show ideas, feedback, responses to something I have said or whatever, that's the way to reach out to the show. Next up, what have you been watching, reading, playing? This one for me is a little bit tough. I just feel like I've been watching a lot, but I haven't been reading or playing a whole lot. So I'll just start at the bottom with playing. I am still just playing MLB The Show. Baseball season's about to start, and I am ready for it. Reading wise, I've not been reading anything. I have transitioned a little bit out of music. I'm still listening to a lot of music, but I have been hitting up some podcasts a lot recently. I do have one nonfiction thing I need to polish out, and then I'm going to be diving headlong back into some Stephen King stuff because I'm definitely craving it. But pretty much since mid-December, I've been heavily into music, and then now podcasting is hitting me a bit. So I am going to circle back to reading though, because I do feel the hunger for it, and I am missing it. So I'll definitely swing back that way here fairly soon. And then in terms of watching, this is where it's been heavy. I'm still watching Battlestar Galactica, although I haven't watched a ton of it recently. I have a reason for that, which I will get to at the tail end of this little watching section. Also, Masters of the Air is still airing on Apple TV Plus. I just saw a headline, I didn't cover it for the news, that it is the most successful show in Apple's history so far, beating out things like Ted Lasso and some of the other stuff that they've done that has been really good. Masters of the Air is blowing it out of the water in terms of performance, which is good. The show has been incredible so far. It really, really got me on the newest episode. It hit me. I've talked about it on I don't know if it was this show or the other show, or even my spin-off show that I did and wasn't super consistent with. But I'm not really one to like vocally respond to stuff very often. I'm not one to like shout for joy or whatever. I'm just not in general. So when a show or movie or something gets me to do that, it's notable. And yeah, I had an audible wow as I got goosebumps all up and down my arms and stuff on the latest episode. They did a great job with some storytelling there. So highly recommend that show if you're a fan of Band of Brothers and the Pacific. This is a worthy follow up to those. My next one, just finished up True Detective Night Country. The final episode of the new season aired last week. Watched that, enjoyed the hell out of it. Really, really loved what they did this season. It's been very, very divisive online. But I loved it. I really enjoyed it quite a bit. I mean, it's nowhere near the first season, but honestly, what is the first season of True Detective is some of the best TV I've ever seen. But it was definitely good. I'd say easily within the realm of like season 3, which I really enjoyed. There is no season 2, of course. And then I think I talked about going down the list here, watching Revenge of the Sith. I think maybe I mentioned that last time. So over the last number of months, I jumped into episode 2 because I had watched episode 1 a number of times and then stalled out on a rewatch. So with this rewatch, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to start with episode 1 because I think I've watched it like 3 or 4 times. Trying to kick off like a full rewatch, and then and it wasn't stalled out for any other reason other than I usually got sidetracked by something else. So I was like, all right, I'm going to jump into 2. So I watched 2, watched 3. And then over last weekend, I think I threw on Solo, which is actually the first time I've watched the first time that I've watched Solo since theaters. So that was kind of cool, and I really enjoyed it. And then from there, I dove right into some more one-time watches. I actually made a mistake because I'm going through chronologically. I am skipping the animation because I did watch Rebels in prep for Ahsoka. So I'm skipping out on that. Bad Batch I've been watching fairly new or fairly recently, the first 2 seasons. The 3rd season just started. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. But I was going to go Solo, and I was like, all right, so I'm just going to dive to the next thing, which is Andor. But that was the mistake because it wasn't Andor. And I was about, I don't know, maybe a halfway through the first episode of Andor before it dawned on me that, like, wait a minute, Princess, this is like right, but I mean, well, something hit me in the head where I realized, like, wait a minute, I thought of Leia being a little girl and Obi-Wan and realized, shit, Obi-Wan comes before Andor. So I shut Andor off, and then I haven't got a chance to circle back to it yet, but I'm going to jump in and watch Obi-Wan for the first time since it aired originally. So it'll be my first rewatch of that, and then I'll rewatch Andor, which is the first time I've rewatched that. Then I'll rewatch Rogue One, which I've seen a number of times, and then right into the original trilogy and just carry my way through. So I haven't decided what I'm going to do after I watch Return of the Jedi, if I'm going to go into the entire Mandalorian stuff, which I really love all that stuff. I haven't made those decisions yet, but yeah, so that's where I'm at. I've just watched Solo, as well as it was Wednesday, I think. I was at work, and then I saw a ad on social media saying that for the 50-year anniversary, Godfather 2 was in select theaters. So I looked it up. It was the company that my local theater that I go to. It's not local; it's a nationwide chain. But they had an ad, but I didn't hold my breath because the theater I have near me has only got 14 screens, and it seems like a lot of times when they have these special screening events, I tend to not see it at my theater. So I wasn't holding my breath, but I pulled it up, and lo and behold, that same night there was a 6:30 show of Godfather 2. I've seen the first Godfather, probably would have been the 45-year anniversary, which would have been what, 7 years ago now. And I did go see the first Godfather, and it was really cool to see it in theaters. But I've never seen the second one. So after a 10-hour day at work, I went and grabbed lunch, killed some time between because I had like about an hour between lunch dinner didn't eat up all that time. So I waited. I didn't have time to go home, and then I hit Godfather 3. By the time I got home, I had been out of the house for 15 hours between my 10-hour shift, a break in between, and then a 3+ hour movie of Godfather 3. But it was still really cool. It was awesome to see one of the greatest sequels of all time on the big screen for the first time ever, which is very fitting for this episode since we're also talking about one of the greatest sequels, 2 of the greatest sequels of all time as well. And then before I get to my last one, Mike said in the chat, still watching Farscape in between games, thinking about giving Under the Dome another chance. Are you talking reading or watching? Oh no, okay, I should just read further. I love 95% of that book and really hated the 5%. With time, maybe opinion has changed. And I know there's a lot of people that don't really care for the end of Under the Dome. I really enjoyed it. I actually it's in terms of Stephen King's 1,000 or close to 1,000-page books. That was a fucking giant book, one you could kill someone with if you wanted to. That I actually think I may have gone through that one faster than any other book of that size and girth. In my first time reading, I couldn't put it down. I can see where people didn't like the ending, but I don't know. It worked for me. But we were just talking on Dark Tower Palaver earlier about the guy that was of the many things he's done. He also did the Under the Dome show, which is not great at all. So that's why when you initially said Under the Dome, my first thought was the show because that's fresh in my mind. But that's cool. Yeah, if you do end up diving in and giving a reread, you'll have to let me know what you think. I haven't reread it, I don't think, since it first came out, so that one's not as fresh for me. But I do remember enjoying it quite a bit when it first was published. God, I don't even know how long ago that was now. I think I do still have my extended content thing up. Let's see, Under the Dome, 2009. Good God, is that long ago? I was thinking like 2011. I guess that's 11/22/63 though. So yeah, that's nuts. That's a long time ago. I guess a reread is probably on the docket for me at some point in the near future. I know I don't have it on audiobook. I read that one in hardcover when it first came out. But then my last one I wanted to talk about, and it is the reason I have not read or not watched, I'm sorry, a whole lot. I've not faltered on a lot of stuff, but I put a lot of stuff to the side because it was during the Super Bowl shortly after the Super Bowl, a few days after they released the trailer for X-Men 97, which starts late in March. I think it's March 20 something. And it dawned on me, I'm like, God, I wish I would have watched the animated series, X-Men animated series on Disney Plus, watched it all the way through in prep for this, but I didn't. I'm like, I didn't think about it in time. But then I realized the date, and I realized, like, oh shit, no, I've still got a little over a month, which is a week or so ago. Now I think I've got less than a month. But I thought, you know what, let me just put everything on hold, and I'm going to go through and binge through that. So I've been watching that, probably the heaviest, X-Men the animated series. I was talking to Peter actually not too long ago, and I was telling him that, you know, the reason I wanted to rewatch the whole thing is because back in the day when you're just watching it on Saturday morning cartoons or after school, syndication or whatever, you didn't really have any way to know for sure if you had seen every episode. That's just not the way things worked back in the day. I mean, they would usually play them in order and stuff. But it's like, you know, something going on after school, so now you miss an episode. So there's just no way to know for sure. It's not like today where you could just stream and binge through everything and know you hit everything. And I do know that they're continuing on right from where the X-Men the animated series left off. So my goal is kind of like what I did with Rebels, where I watched the entirety of Rebels in, God, it was a couple weeks. It was a very cram session thing. I'm going to attempt the same thing for X-Men the animated series and try to get the entire thing under my belt for the first time since I was a wee lad, and so I could be fresh going into X-Men 97 here pretty soon. So looking forward to that show coming up later next month, which is crazy because we only got a few days, 6 days until it's March 1st. So I've got to hit it hard because it's a little bit longer than Rebels was. Rebels was 4 seasons, and there was like 2 seasons that were like 10-ish episodes, but then the 2 middle seasons were like 20 plus episodes. So there's a lot of episodes to watch, but this one is similar. I think the first season's a little bit shorter, and the final season might be a little bit shorter, but the 3 middle ones are sizable, so there's going to be more episodes to watch. So I'm going to have to zoom through it. It's actually interesting watching it because some of the stuff in the first season I haven't thought about since I was a kid, but then a scene starts, I'm like, dude, I know where this scene's going. I remember this, which is crazy. So that's been a lot of fun, and it is good stuff. I mean, growing up, my dad grew up as a Marvel fan, so I grew up with a lot of hand-me-down stuff, so I'd say that's probably my biggest reason I'm a Marvel fan over DC, even though I do love some DC stuff. But I would say that, you know, like X-Men the animated series, if nothing else, helped balance out the Batman the animated series, so that you know, like Batman didn't seduce me to the DC side in the early 90s when I was watching that shit. You know, X-Men was there to keep me grounded in the Marvel side as well. So I would say that X-Men, the original animated series, I owe a lot to it for being a Marvel fan. Okay, so next up, oh, you know what? Yeah, okay, I did change the slide. All right, I have the next slide thing was wrong, so it made me freak out that I hadn't done any of the slides yet. Okay, so next up, jumping over to news. Got a lot of news to cover. So let's go ahead and jump on. Oh, that is the wrong. I did that in the last episode too. Did that on the Dark Tower show too. I've got I think this pedal. I got a little pedal thing. And it's got 3 buttons on it. That startled me more so than the Dark Tower one did. And it just slid over on me. So what I thought was hitting the big button in the middle, which is changing slides, I accidentally hit the little side pedal, which was the intro. And then I've got Barney Gumble on the other side.
Just hook it to my veins!
So that's a little behind the scenes, but let's go ahead and jump on over to the first news bit. And it is Bong Joon-ho's Mickey 17 has been pushed to January 2025. I believe we covered it on a previous episode. I know we covered it on my recap of 2023 and look forward to 2024 because Mickey 17 was one of my top 20 most anticipated projects of the year, and it was a few episodes back. I think that they announced that it was being pulled off the schedule. There was some speculation that maybe they just weren't ready for the movie yet, but they didn't have a date for it, so there was some speculation of what was going on. But now they've given it a date. It's January 2025. So unfortunate. I'm always slightly bummed when one of my more anticipated movies of the year gets kicked to a future year. But this one was a sci-fi one. It's starring Robert Pattinson. Bong Joon-ho obviously did the amazing movie Parasite. This is going to be his follow-up to Parasite. And it says, I also have a recap here. It says Mickey 17 is based on Edward Ashton's novel Mickey 7, which concerns an employee on a human expedition sent to colonize an ice world. After one version dies, a new body is regenerated with most of his memories intact. So that sounds very cool. Some cool sci-fi shit. And Bong Joon-ho did an amazing job with Parasite, so that will earn him my movie ticket money for any upcoming projects. So looking forward to that one in January 2025. I am a little bit perplexed because I know this isn't necessarily horror. That, you know, with horror movies, January is an absolute dumping ground, and if a movie's in January, you can pretty much count on it, it'll be shit. But that's generally horror. You don't see a lot of like big sci-fi movies coming out in January. It's going to be going up against whatever the big Christmas release is. A lot of times a big Christmas release, because at the end of December, is able to carry into January and make a shitload of money. So it's going to probably have some stiff competition. I don't remember what's coming out on Christmas this year, but it's just, I don't know. I'm trying to hope that this doesn't mean that they think it's not a great movie and they're just dumping it there. But I am a bit nervous. I'd be a lot more happy if it were later in the year, like May or even April or something. But January makes me a little bit nervous. We'll see what happens, though. Next up, we have Masters of the Universe. The He-Man property is getting its a live action movie directed by Travis Knight, which he is most famous for at least on my side anyway. He did the Bumblebee movie, which I think is probably the best Transformers movie that I have seen, and I know I've not seen all of them, but of the ones I've seen, I really enjoyed Bumblebee quite a bit. So that's interesting. I mean, I've not been the biggest He-Man fan. I was kind of a fan of it when I was really, really, really little. It may have been one of my first fandoms. I think even predating my love of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I remember at one point, I have a memory where, because my grandpa did leather work, so there'd always be people who'd come in with various things. And I remember somebody actually came in with a sword that wanted to get like a sheath or something. And I remember I was so young that I remember I was being held like in the arms of like a parent of some kind. And then they like let me like hold it. I mean, now that I'm thinking back, they were probably holding it and just letting me put my hands on it and act like I was holding it, because I was probably, it was probably a good chunk of the same weight I was at the time if I was being held by a parent. So I would have been pretty young, but I remember thinking I have the power He-Man stuff. So it is pretty early. It's a little bit before my time. Usually people a little bit older than me, 5 or 6 years older than me, are the kids that grew up on like Transformers and Masters of the Universe. But I did see some stuff on replays and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. It seems interesting. I haven't watched any of the newer cartoons and stuff that they've done. But yeah, it's interesting development to do a live action version. Next up, Katie Sackhoff is we talked last episode, I think, about the new standalone Predator movie that is not tied to the Prey movie, because Prey is getting a sequel, but there's also a standalone Predator movie coming out. Apparently the word on the street is that it is going to have a female lead, and Katie Sackhoff has been tweeting that she wants to be involved, and she feels that she would be do a good job at killing some predators. I can't disagree. I mean, I'm currently watching Battlestar Galactica, which is kind of where she put herself on the map. I, of course, as a Halloween fan, know her also from Halloween Resurrection, but also she's been a badass in Star Wars with Bo-Katan, both voice-wise in the Clone Wars, and then now live action in The Mandalorian. So she's a badass. I would love to see her playing in a Predator movie. That'd be pretty fucking cool, I think. So let's see. Next up, jumping into the Marvel block of the news, let's go ahead and hit the first one, and it is Marvel bamboozled us on the title of Deadpool and Wolverine. I recorded last time, and it was right before the Super Bowl 2 weeks ago, and there was a leaked photo, and I actually didn't actually share it on screen, but I saw it, and it was basically a blurred photo, and it was actually the right text for the title, but it said Deadpool, and it was clear. I mean, it was blurry, but it was still clear enough that you could see what it said, and it said Deadpool and friend singular. And so they must have let that leak, because that got the internet going, including myself that reported it here on the last episode. And then the next day, the Super Bowl airs, and the trailer plays, and it says Deadpool and Wolverine. So Marvel, good job on bamboozling the internet into believing that the title would be Deadpool and friend, but it is indeed Deadpool and Wolverine. So pretty cool. The trailer looks awesome. I'm looking forward to that movie quite a bit. It's the only Marvel movie coming out this year, so I'm pretty excited for that. Next up, we got some visuals. The first visuals that I've got was released on Valentine's Day, and it is a big one. It is Marvel released this. It is a animated thing of Happy Valentine's Day, and it is the Fantastic Four, and they are done in the style of the new actors. So this is actually a few things here. There's first of all, they are finally confirming the fucking casting. We talked about this, I think, at the end of last year. It is indeed Pedro Pascal from The Last of Us. I mean, this is just from one of the articles I grabbed. Of course, Pedro's been in a shitload of stuff, but The Last of Us most recent is Reed Richards. Vanessa Kirby, which you know from Mission Impossible, more recent Mission Impossible movies, is Sue Storm, aka the Invisible Woman. Joseph Quinn from Stranger Things as Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch. And then Eben Moss Bacharach as Ben Grimm, aka the Thing. One thing I'm going to point out too about this is the picture in the background of Ben Grimm turning into the Thing. I think that's probably a little bit of a nod to Eben Moss Bacharach, because he obviously is not recognizable, so they put a portrait of him up on the wall, which is pretty cool. And then Mike says the robot looks like it's from the 80s. Yeah, I think all of this is feeling very old school. I would even say that a lot of it feels very 60s to me. Not necessarily the robot, but like even just the text, and like there's some stuff about it that feels very old school. And I'm kind of forgetting now, but the robot is from the comics, and there's an actor that there's rumors, I forgot to take it down, but there's some rumors about who might be voicing that robot in the movie as it comes out. But also the other big parts about it is at the very bottom of it, you can see it says The Fantastic Four, so that is most likely going to be the title of the film. And then also the other thing is, as I was just mentioning, the style of it feels very old school. It feels kind of very 60s to me. Just like the text, the overall like art style of it just feels very old, and so it kind of feeds to the rumors that Fantastic Four is going to be taking place during the 60s potentially. So that's really cool. Finally got a title, finally got a confirmation on the casting, as well as release date I think is on there, but that hasn't really changed from what we've known previous. So looking forward to that, and that is allegedly going to be filming very soon as well. Let me go ahead and change the picture as well as the slide here, because then we also had a really cool Fantastic Four artwork done by Phil Noto, the comic book artist. On his post, he did go out of his way to say that no, he did not do that previous official one that I just showed, but he did do this one in the style of these new actors, and I think it's freaking badass. So, and it is very similar in style to the other one, so much so I understand why he said nope, that wasn't me that did that official Marvel one, and he shouted out the real person that did it, but he said that this was his kind of tribute to the new Fantastic Four announcements and stuff. So thank you, Phil Noto, for a really cool illustration. It's obviously a little bit more iconic than that Valentine's one that was official. So I do appreciate it for that, and it's definitely cool to see the actors in each of the roles there. Mike says Frank Welker is the robot. I don't remember. Fantastic Four robot. Herbie is the name of it. Let's see if I can Herbie actor and see if I can find that rumor, because it was just a rumor. So nothing official. No, I'm not seeing anything. Let's see. No, okay. I don't remember. I don't remember I even saw it. But either way, there are some rumors that who might voice that robot. But and Frank Welker, is that RoboCop, or am I No, that's a voice actor you're talking about. My RoboCop is Weller is the guy, is RoboCop's name. RoboCop, Peter Weller. Okay, yeah, I was mixing up, but you're talking a voice actor. No, and it wasn't the rumor I had heard. It was an actor that we would all know, someone like goddamn, just one of those like Patton Oswalt types. Not that it was him, but someone like that, where they said that maybe that would be the voice of the robot. But I don't know. Well, that again, it was all just speculation and rumor, nothing official. So. Next up, we've got, let's see here. We got that one up on the screen already. All right, I lost track of my spot here. And then next up, we do actually have a rumor, and it is a rumor about Fantastic Four. The rumor is that Fantastic Four is going to actually take place over 2 timelines. The person reporting it is usually 50-50. But the reason that I felt like it was maybe worth mentioning is because there are some other sites that are picking up on it and saying that they are basically hearing similar things from people that would know. So not necessarily the like absolute for sure, like run into the payphones, reporter, like call into your editor type thing in the old days. Nothing crazy like that, but it is notable that a number of people have reported it. And I got a quote here. This is quote. The other thing that I'd heard is the script has two storylines together. The comparison I heard was a bit like Greta Gerwig's Little Women. I did not hear what 2 timelines or storylines were, one in the past and one in the future. So yeah, not a lot of details, but it is interesting because I think that is now probably one of the most debated things is what time frame does the Fantastic Four take place during? Is it, the 60s? Is it the modern day? I have speculated that they could even do modern day, but do it in a different universe. I mean, now that we're doing multiverse stuff, you can kind of get away with the idea that, oh no, like in all the Avengers shit that we've seen, the Fantastic Four didn't help. Well, if they're in a different universe, they wouldn't be able to. So there's a lot of interesting and cool options that they have to get around the fact that they have not shown up thus far. Next up, we got another rumor, and this is Ben Mendelsohn really, really wants to play Doctor Doom. Of course, this is going to be kind of tough because he already is playing Telos in the one of the Skrulls in Captain Marvel movies, as well as he was in Secret Invasion. He's pretty big role that he has there. But he told GQ recently, he says, I would almost give my eye and teeth to play Doctor Doom. He says, I think Doctor Doom is a great unread Marvel character that could and should be done. But it is what it is. And then also there was a quote from years ago, and it was actually before he even played Talos in the Captain Marvel movie, he said of Doctor Doom, he said, quote, "He is the greatest comic book character of all time. The thing that really appeals about Victor is the damage and trauma, the loss of family, the wrong done to him, then the revenge and the takeover. Then it's the protectiveness of Latveria wrapped in the Cold War vibes. What really makes him great is the caring bit. That's what's great about Doctor Doom, and I just like him." So this is not a newer thing. This is something that for years he has loved Doctor Doom. I don't know, man. I mean, in this day and age where Andy Serkis is playing both or Supreme Leader Snoke, and then he played the guy in the one episode of Andor, I think that, especially with Telos being a shapeshifter as well, if you were to change up the voice enough, I don't think that people are gonna like immediately jump to like, oh, Doctor Doom and Telos, or Talos. So yeah, I mean, I love Ben Mendelsohn too. So I would say sign me the fuck up for him playing Doctor Doom. I think that would be pretty incredible. Let me see, make sure I've got the right slide here. All right, next up we have let's see, Marvel. The rumor is Marvel is downsizing Kang, if not removing him entirely. And Kang Dynasty, the next Marvel Avengers movie, is going to be getting a new title, and it will no longer be called Kang Dynasty. And it says the rumor is Kang will be greatly reduced, if not entirely excised from future of the MCU. No word on how they would adjust to that in terms of like, is Doctor Doom going to step in? What are you going to do? Like, there's all kinds of questions involved, but it does sound like Kang is potentially on his way out or being greatly reduced in importance than what he would have been previously. And I was kind of wondering, is the way that Loki season 2 ended, I kind of wondered if that can be used in a way to really spin it out to where he is no longer the threat, like maybe just kind of, I know that wasn't going to be the intention that Loki kind of solved it all, but it would be a way to do it because it did feel like a way that could have been a resolution. So maybe they can kind of retcon that into being that Loki kind of overrode Kang and kind of removed that threat or something like that. I don't know. Next up, we've got Nicolas Cage rumored to be playing a live-action Spider-Man noir. That is the role, of course, that he voiced in Into the Spider-Verse, the first movie. And now the rumor is that Sony is going to continue. I mean, who knows, though? I mean, I don't really like getting into the box office stuff very much because, I mean, this is art, and if you have fun with it, who the fuck cares if it made money or not? I don't really find the financial stuff as appealing as some people for conversation fodder, but I will say that Madam Web, to no surprise to me, I don't know, when I saw the first trailer for that, I was like, how is this a movie that people are even trying? This is going to fail pretty hard, and it certainly has. It is like historically bad, and there's even been some speculation that Sony may completely fold the Spider-Man universe up completely and rely only on the Marvel MCU Spider-Man stuff. So all of this I mean, of course, like Venom and stuff is probably gonna stick around because that's actually been doing okay, but all this other ancillary Spider-Man shit, there's this whole plan of shit. They want to just keep coming out with shit that doesn't have Spider-Man but has Spider-Man attached characters, and of course they've already filmed like the which one of the one they have later in the year, Kraven the Hunter, but whatever else they have coming up on their docket, there's some rumors that they may be reevaluating whether any of those are going to move forward with the dismal performance of Madam Web. So who knows if this is even something that maybe was going to happen, but with the failure of Madam Web, who knows if this will still happen. But it's very interesting to think of the idea of Nicolas Cage jumping in to play Spider-Man Noir. Of course, he's had his history with Marvel, playing Ghost Rider, as well as one of my favorite little bits of trivia about Nicolas Cage is his name is actually Nicholas Coppola, and his uncle Francis Ford Coppola, but he was on one of the sets on a Coppola movie, and he felt like he was just a nobody bit player, background character almost, but he was feeling a lot of resentment from people because of his name and the fact that he was basically probably getting a job just because of his uncle, so he decided to create a stage name, and thus comes Nicolas Cage, but the Marvel aspect to it there is that is indeed the name he took. Nicolas Cage Cage comes from Luke Cage, the the indestructible street level hero that we've seen on the Netflix show now. So Nicolas Cage is obviously a huge fan of comic books and Marvel, and so much so that, you know, Luke Cage went to creating his fucking name, his screen name. So that's pretty cool. So he's a cool dude. He's pretty tied into comic book stuff. So if this were still moving forward, I would at least consider giving it a shot. Although with the non-Marvel side, like Sony's own shit has not been to my taste. So let's see. And then Mike says, so Cage is some version of Superman and Spider-Man. Yeah, I mean, so far, yeah. I mean, he had his little cameo that paid off for that infamous costume test picture that's been on the internet for 20 years in the Flash movie. And then he's played Ghost Rider, and then now he would potentially be reprising his role as Spider-Man Noir, because again, he did voice that character in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So this would be a second portrayal of it, but of course for people that don't give animation credit, they would see this as a much bigger deal of him playing it live action. Let's see. The next up here, it actually feels somewhat connected. Maybe that's why I ordered it this way. The next one is a rumor that Marvel MCU is planning a Ghost Rider movie with an A-list actor in the starring role. The rumor basically is that Kevin Feige loves his character, has been wanting to bring this character onto the big screen for a good while now. And that, yeah, the rumor is that whoever they would get to play Johnny Storm, or Johnny Blaze, I'm sorry. I always used to get that confused where it was like Johnny Blaze, I would call the Human Torch from Fantastic Four, because Blaze and Human Torch, but that's actually backwards because Johnny Blaze is Ghost Rider and Johnny Storm is the Human Torch. So Johnny Blaze would be an A-list actor. And then incidentally, there happens to be a quote from a long time ago, a couple years back, where Ryan Gosling had expressed interest in playing the character Ghost Rider. And I actually have a quote from Kevin Feige. And again, this is years ago, so this doesn't confirm anything, and this is all just a rumor right now anyway. But a number of years ago, in response to the fact that Ryan Gosling was saying that he might want to play Ghost Rider, Kevin Feige said, quote, "Hey man, if Ryan wants to be Ghost Rider, Gosling's unbelievable. Ryan is amazing. I'd love to find a place for him in the MCU." So he isn't necessarily saying, "Oh yeah, I'd sign him up for Ghost Rider," but but he is saying I'd find a place for him in the MCU. So I don't know. I know that's just throwing an old quote out of context into this rumor, but it is something to wonder about, especially when they say they do want an A-list actor playing the role. Someone like Ryan Gosling would fit that quite well. Next up, we've got the X-Men 97. I just talked a little bit about X-Men, watching the original animated series. Is confirmed that X-Men 97 is a standalone. It is not part of the MCU. This is totally fine to me. This, like, honestly, it would make no sense to make it in the MCU, really. So this, I mean, there's already such a built-in thing with the original show. The original show obviously didn't cross over with any other Marvel stuff. It was just X-Men. So it would make no sense for them to be in the MCU. Like, to me, when this kind of came out over the last like week or so, I kind of rolled my eyes where it's like, does this even have to be said? Like, I never even assumed that it would be in the MCU at all. So I don't know, whatever. Still, it's worth mentioning for sure. Next up, another rumor, and this one is not as fun. Apparently there is some strife amongst Sony's top brass and Kevin Feige over Spider-Man 4, namely the director of Spider-Man 4. Allegedly, Sony wants John Watts, who did the previous 3 movies. Their thought process is, if it isn't broken, then don't fix it. And apparently Kevin Feige wants to shake things up. And of course, I covered an episode or 2 back that the rumor was that Drew Goddard was potentially the one that they were wanting to tab to direct Spider-Man 4, because John Watts is obviously doing the Star Wars Acolyte, I think, is the one that he's doing. So he's in the Star Wars realm right now. So if they wanted to get this moving quickly, it may not work for them to wait for John Watts, as well as, I mean, I don't know, but Kevin Feige apparently was looking at Drew Goddard, but who knows? It sounds like there's some strife over which direction they're going. I could actually see it both ways. Honestly, I can see, wanting John Watts. I mean, I certainly would prefer him just because he has done such a great job with these first three that he did. But also Drew Goddard's amazing, and it really comes down to how long do we want to wait for Spider-Man 4. Also inside of this article that I was looking at rumor-wise, there was another rumor, and I'm just going to tag it into here. It's a separate thing, but it's kind of somewhat related. The rumor was also that producer Amy Pascal, which she was actually formerly the head of Sony, but she has stuck around and she has stuck her name on the Spider-Man movies because she helped bring those to fruition when she was the head of the studio. And as she has moved out of that role, she has kept the producing part on the Spider-Man stuff. But the rumor is that she wants Kevin Feige involved in the Miles Morales live-action movie once Tom Holland steps away from the Spider-Man role. So she's looking at it long-term in terms of, Tom Holland probably doesn't have more than a movie or two left in him, and maybe probably one standalone movie and some Avengers movies, and then that might be the end of Tom Holland's turn as Spider-Man. So she's looking at it as, okay, well, what's the next thing? The next thing is going to be Miles Morales, and it does sound like she does want Feige and the MCU involved, which is awesome because I think Miles, as much as Peter Parker, deserves the MCU level of treatments. Next up, and this kind of goes along with that a little bit. The rumor is that Spider-Man 4 is actually going to be coming out before and will be leading directly into the next Avengers movie. So the rumor is the script is already being written as we speak, and that is notable because the next Avengers movie is not that far away. I guess it kind of is, but like when you look at the calendar, the way it's filled out, it doesn't look like there's a lot of room for Spider-Man to have popped up before the next set of Avengers movies. But the rumor here is that it indeed will. And the one thing that I would point out is, when Marvel was like releasing their Disney was releasing their release calendars and stuff, I remember thinking to myself, Spider-Man, well, there's no room for a Spider-Man movie here. But I did remember thinking to myself, well, there is also Sony, this is a co-existence thing. So the Sony's release calendar, if they have any like dates that are reserved for a movie that they haven't announced yet, and it's just an untitled movie on that date, that could very well turn into a Spider-Man movie. It doesn't necessarily have to be on Disney's calendar. So I know that it's a joint production, but it does sound like if it comes out before the next Avengers movie, I think that there's maybe a Spider-Man movie in the next couple years. It might go into production early next year, late this year, and then come out a year or two later, which is insane to think about because I think we got our kind of mindset on the stuff that Marvel has unveiled for the next a handful of years, and there's just been no Spider-Man in there, but Spider-Man might surprise us and pop up where we least expect him. All right, Mike says he has to be right back. He's going to put his kid to bed. That's awesome. See you in a second, Mike. Next up, we got some horror movie stuff. Oh, maybe if I can find the damn. Where are we at here? There we go. And that is moving over to some horror movie stuff. This is not a rumor, this is news. Megan 2.0 has been delayed to May 2025. It was set in mid-January, and it is now moving to May 2025. So it is moving from January to May, which is actually good. I was talking earlier, and maybe, I don't remember if these are the same studios, but Mickey 17 was actually landing in January 2025. So with Megan, that was supposed to be in January 2025, now moving to May, I wonder if those things are related. And if nothing else, I'm glad that Megan has moved out of January because, again, horror movies in January usually don't mix well. So I'm not that I'm worried about Megan because the first one was awesome. But yeah, I feel much better about May. And it actually gives me a lot of hope because if you got a horror movie you're dropping in the summer area, like late May, or not late because it just says May 2025. But if you're dropping something in May, that means you have a lot of hope in it. So that should be cool. Next up, we got they are working at Peacock on a John Wayne Gacy not non-scripted. Non-scripted is reality, like a documentary. No, this is a scripted show they're working on for John Wayne Gacy over at Peacock. I don't know what to think about this. It's always kind of whatever with serial killer stuff. There's a lot of shitty ones out there. It feels like whenever they're based off true things, 9 out of 10 times they're bad. But there has been some good ones over the last couple of years. So it would be interesting to see if they can do a good job. I don't know why it's so much easier to fictionalize killers, and I know there's like an uncomfortable aspect of like a real killer, and what are you doing by making movies about them and stuff, but I feel like it's like wars, right? Wars are terrible, but it is like the extremes of humanity. So I can kind of see why people would dig them. And Gacy's certainly an interesting story for sure. So we'll be interested to see how that progresses. Next up, huge news. Christopher Nolan apparently wants to do a horror movie. This caught me off guard. Last episode we ended the news section by talking about I almost said the Wachowskis, the Coen brothers, not the Wachowski sisters, but the Coen brothers are coming back together. They've been not broken up, but they've been doing their own separate things for a couple of years now. And the announcement was they're coming back together and they're going to be doing a horror movie that's going to be bloody. And then now here we are this week, an episode later, talking about Christopher Nolan, and he wants to do a horror movie. Got a quote here. He says, "I'd love to make a horror film, but I think a really good horror film requires a really exceptional idea, and those are few and far between. So I haven't found a story that lends itself to that." And then he goes on, another quote here, and says, "But I think it's very interesting genre from a cinematic point of view. It's also one of the few genres where the studios make a lot of these films, and they are films that have a lot of bleakness and a lot of abstraction. They have a lot of qualities that Hollywood is generally very resistant to put in films, but it's a genre where it is allowable." So very interesting. It'll be interesting to see what Mr. Christopher Nolan comes up with. It does sound like this is all in the early phases. It sounds like he doesn't even have an idea that he really likes yet. But it is something that we can keep track of. Is, are we going to be seeing a Christopher Nolan horror movie before too long? Next up, Linda Hamilton talking about Stranger Things Season 5 and her role in that. I keep forgetting that she is involved in Stranger Things. Let's see here. I keep forgetting that she was cast in that. We covered that in one of the earlier episodes. And I just keep forgetting that, our queen of action that we are going to be talking a little bit about later in Terminator 2 is indeed taking a role in Season 5 of Stranger Things. And I have some quotes here. She says, quote, "I really feel like, is there a place for me in that show? Having watched it for 4 seasons and loving it so much, I thought I don't belong there. That's their world." Then the next quote is, quote, "It's really interesting to try to insert yourself in a story that you know very well. It was a little odd for me. I felt like a little bit of an imposter syndrome there, but we're making it work. I'm delighted and having a wonderful time on that show. They've created a good place for me, and I'm going to run with it." So I'm pretty excited about this. Because and also what a queen, man. I mean, she's such a badass in everything she plays. But then also, like, it just feels like with reading this, it says that she's having watched the first 4 seasons and loved it so much. She talks about being odd because it feels like she's an imposter. What I take away from this is it's interesting because it's just picturing Linda Hamilton chilling at home, watching Netflix and watching Stranger Things and just being like invested in it and loving it. And then, down the road, the final season, she signs up to play a role in it. It's just weird. I mean, I guess all these filmmakers and actors that we all love and adore are just like us. They love watching shit too. They wouldn't make it if they didn't love watching it. But it's still just so unique to me that it's like, oh yeah, Linda Hamilton, of course she watches Stranger Things. It's just, I don't know. I don't know why I should be surprised by it, but it's just cool because especially when she says having watched all 4 seasons and loving it so much, and then talking about like, I don't know. It just feels like, I don't know. It just feels awesome. Kind of cool to see. It just feels like it humanizes her a bit. And it, just cool to imagine her, waiting for those Netflix drops, for new seasons and stuff. And, yeah, it's just really cool. Love Linda Hamilton. Next up, we've got Christoph Waltz to be starring in Luca Beson's Dracula. So Luca Beson, of course, did the Leon the Professional and a few other things, but The Professional is one of my all-time favorite movies that he has done. Gary Oldman in one of his finest villainous performances in The Professional. He's doing a Dracula adaptation, and Christoph Waltz is starring. I would assume Christoph Waltz plays Dracula, and not like Van Helsing or whoever. But I will say I am very interested to see what might come of this down the road here with a new Dracula adaptation with potentially Christoph Waltz involved, with Luca Besson directing. So that's pretty cool. Let's go to the next one here. We've got The Conjuring 4 will be the final film. It is what this article is saying. And it is also going to be directed by Michael Chavis, who did The Devil Made Me Do It, which is the last one. The only thing that I'm really unclear on with this, because I've kind of heard that they wanted to wrap it with Conjuring 4, but the one thing I have not really heard clarity on is, does that include all the spin-offs? Does that mean we're not going to get any more Annabelle movies anymore? I'm trying to think of some of the other spin-offs that they've done. The Nun, are they done entirely? Because it seems really crazy to me that they would just, pack up the tents for a multi-billion-dollar franchise and just say we're done with this. If James Wan wants to wrap up the titular Conjuring movies, totally understand that. Maybe the end of Ed and Lorraine being screen characters, but some of these spin-off things that they've done in the larger Conjuring universe, it would seem wild to me if they were packing those in as well. So next up, we've got going over to DC now. We got a little bit of a DC section to talk about here. DC. So Superman, the first one here, Superman Legacy, apparently is what killed Superman and Lois on the CW. There's an article that went kind of into it, but I think at the root of it all, I have a quote from the head of CW, and he says, they don't want a competing Superman project in the marketplace. He doesn't say it overtly, but with Superman Legacy coming down the pike, that makes total sense. I think this is interesting because when Superman and Lois, they went from season 3 to season 4, and they said they had to gut the show. They're going to take 10 to 15 of the general, because there's Superman and Lois, but then there's 10 to 15 other people that are their close family, their friends, some of the people in Smallville, some of the kind of reoccurring supporting characters. It was quite a big show, and the rumor was, not the rumor, they literally gutted it and said you got to get rid of almost all of them and cut it down to under 10. Which again, if you got Superman, Lois, and then the kids, that's 4 of them. It's so you've got to go from 8 plus supporting characters down to less than half of that, or around half of that. So kind of wild. And then of course it was canceled, and I think the big rumor had been is that CW itself was killing it. The CW had been kind of canceling the DC shows slowly as each of the shows have kind of fulfilled their realm, but it did seem like they were talking that the one thing they wanted to stay in business with was Superman and Lois. It was the last standing of the Arrowverse shows. And then the rumor was okay, so CW was just done, and they wanted to, gut Superman and Lois, let them do one more season, gutted, and they were going to cancel them. But now it looks like, as this news is coming out, it sounds like it was not indeed their decision, but it was Warner Brothers' decision, and Warner Brothers wanted to kill it so that there was no other Superman properties going. And this actually reminds me a lot of the Netflix Marvel stuff with Daredevil and all of those cats on the Netflix shows. There was, a lot of people were pretty pissed and up in arms that Netflix killed all these shows. And then months later, we ended up finding out that it was not indeed Netflix's decision, but Marvel that pulled the plug and said, we're not letting you do our shows anymore. And this kind of feels like the same thing just years later now. But it was the same story, the wrong person, the wrong company was getting blamed for the cancellation of a show. So next up, we got a big one for Superman, Superman Legacy, and I got a couple pictures. Let's go ahead and jump on over to it. The first, we have Superman Legacy logo, and then a cast photo. So here's the logo. Excuse me, coughing here. So let me go ahead and get back over to this and then this. So here's the logo that they have, and the reason that what it was is there was a picture sent out on social media from the table read, and this is Isabel Merced that plays Hawk Girl taking a picture of her nameplate, and you see the Superman logo there. And then so yeah, we have that. So that's kind of a cool confirmation of which Superman logo is likely going to be used in the movie. I'm not the biggest fan of this logo. There's a couple logos they've used over the years that feel very little. They don't feel as S-like to me. And this is one of them. This isn't the worst one. What is it? My Pal Superman or whatever, the show they did on HBO Max over the last year is probably my least favorite logo I've ever seen. I love the show. They did a great job, but the Superman logo was not to my liking. This is better than that one. But it feels like it's like understating the S a little bit. It's so heavy in the middle and so light on the outsides. Or on the like the top and bottom of the S are so light that it's like it looks more like a slash through a thing. And it's like I feel like you gotta like squint a little bit to kind of to see the S a little bit more than I would like. I like it to be a little bit more symmetrical, where it's kind of this, there's like a design to it. I mean, I've got a Superman shirt on here. It's like, yeah, it is lighter up top than it is in the middle, but like you could still clearly see the S. So that's kind of more my preference, but I'm not going nuts. It's just a small nitpick that it's not my favorite logo. And then we have the cast photo that was posted by James Gunn. You can see, David Cornsweet in the back. Next to a little bit off to the right of him, kind of in the middle, in the very back, we see Nicholas Hoult with a shaved head playing Lex Luthor. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, that's pretty cool to see the whole cast together. They're I believe they're filming now, so that's pretty awesome. Next up, let's jump on over back to the non-picture stuff. We've got Robert Pattinson. The rumor is Robert Pattinson is going to be appearing in the Penguin show. The Penguin is going to be debuting this year on HBO, and the rumor is that Robert Pattinson, whether he's playing Batman or Bruce Wayne, will be appearing in said show. I think that's awesome. I'm still not a fan of doing like a comic book villain movie or show or anything like that when you don't have the hero. It just feels like there's a balance to the hero and villain, and they're usually two parts of one whole, and so to just do a standalone movie, it just seems I'm just not a fan of it, which is weird because I'm kind of usually a villain fan, but I don't know. I think it'd be cooler to tie in Robert Pattinson and actually see Batman show up in the show, whether it's as Batman or Bruce Wayne. It's all the same, right? Next up in the absurd realm, the Joker sequel has allegedly ballooned to a $200 million budget. This is quite alarming since the original movie only was made on a $60 million budget. I don't know if they're just going out of their mind with special effects and sets and big set pieces and all that kind of shit, or what. I have no idea. But a sequel to a $60 million movie going up to $200 million seems ludicrous to me. Especially because I don't think anyone that really loved that original Joker movie loved it for anything beyond the character study that it was. So, kind of seems crazy to me. And it seems like you're putting a lot of freaking money bet on this movie to where, are you going to, then do, $100 million in marketing, and then now you're talking $400 million in the hole. It just feel like you're putting your profits and stuff at risk. It's like, to me, like 60 million, cool, bump it up to 100 million and call it good there. But to double that and get up to 200 million seems absolutely insane to me. But we'll see what happens. Next up, and this is another visual one, is the Spider-Verse producer is trying to make a Batman Beyond animated movie. And he has an animation that he threw out there, an illustration, to kind of give an idea of what that would look like. So, that is what the Spider-Verse producer wants to do with Batman Beyond. Of course, he's done such a great job with the Spider-Verse movies. It seems to me they would be kicking down his door to get him to make a Batman Beyond animated movie. So, we'll see what happens there. see if that comes through or not. So we are now exiting off of the DC realm. And let's get on over to the next bit of news. And this is a big one. It's funny because I've been talking a little bit about the Beatles over the last few episodes here and there. But they have announced Sam Mendes, most famous for, he did 1917. He did Skyfall and Spectre. Two of the Bond movies. He's done Road to Perdition. He's a pretty famous filmmaker, done a lot of good stuff. But he is doing not one, but 4 Beatles films. Pretty crazy. So some of the details on this: Mendes will be directing all 4 movies, one from the perspective of each band member, including John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, George Harrison. Sony and Mendes had to get McCartney and Starr and the families of Lennon and Harrison on board to make this film series happen. But that has all been done, so that's pretty interesting and pretty cool. And they got a quote here. He says, "I'm honored to be telling the story of the greatest rock band of all time, and I'm excited to challenge the notion of what constitutes a trip to the movies." Let's see. Then I got a quote from I think this is from someone at the studio. It says the dating cadence of the films, the details of which will be shared closer to the release, will be innovative and groundbreaking. I imagine the 4 films will be shot all at the same time, as from the article, which will be a massive undertaking, which would honestly make sense, because if you're telling each of the 4 Beatles having their own movie, but they're all going to be telling probably the same story, but from different views, I feel like you might have kind of a Rashomon thing going on, which is really fucking cool and interesting. But also, if you're covering some of the same events, it would be absolutely insane to not film at the same time, because if you've got 4 actors playing each of the Beatles, it just makes sense to do it kind of like Lord of the Rings, and you're just basically filming one giant 8-hour, mini series, but then you're going to actually edit it out into 3 or 4, standalone movies that'll work together to create the tapestry of the story of the Beatles. So pretty cool. Then I got another quote here to finalize this one out. It says, quote, "We intend this to be a uniquely thrilling and epic cinematic experience. 4 films told from 4 different perspectives, which tell a single story about the most celebrated band of all time." So I think that one was from a studio person as well. So pretty cool. I've no secret that I've been nerding it out on the Beatles the last since basically mid-December. So this is kind of a serendipitous timing for this to be announced now. I'm pretty excited for it. It'll be interesting to see who we find casting and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, and then Mendes is a great director, so I can't wait to see what he has in store for a pretty ballsy thing. Again, making 4 movies at once. That's wild. Okay, next up, this is kind of a big one. Gareth Edwards is directing a new Jurassic World movie. So this one doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So they're calling it Jurassic World and not Jurassic Park. But we'll get to it here. But the first thing, Spielberg is producing, and then David Cope is writing, and that's notable. And so I will admit, I'm a huge Jurassic Park fan. I think that we talked earlier in the first episode or so of this show, we talked about our nerd DNA. And for me, I always talk about, there's kind of the Mount Rushmore for me. There's Terminator 2, there's Jurassic Park, there's Halloween, and there's Star Wars. Those are that's my Mount Rushmore. So Jurassic Park, the original movie, is one of my all-time favorite things. I own a shitload of copies of it. It's a great movie. But the big thing with David Cope is the writer of the original film. Of course, it was based off a book, but he is the one that wrote the script for the original movie. Spielberg producing, that brings some gravitas to it. So let me get to the other stuff, then I'll have my word on it, I guess. But it's then the next thing, it is being called a completely fresh take with no actors from either Jurassic Park or the Jurassic World returning. So it sounds like it's entirely fresh, so it just seems weird to me. Why the fuck are they calling it Jurassic World and not Jurassic Park? And I know this isn't a title. There's no whatever. It just seems weird to me that they're calling it Jurassic World. It just seems to me you'd say we're going to reboot Jurassic Park. Not that we're going to do the first movie again. We're going to do something entirely fresh and new. I don't know why the hell you call it Jurassic World. It just seems weird to me. Your cachet is in the original movie, not in the last 3 things that they've come out with. And the release date for that is set for July 2nd, 2025. So it is fast approaching, because that will be summer of next year. Which, again, it seems like right now a lot of the stuff we're talking about when they get announced is shit that's coming out in 2026 and beyond. So to have something that's coming out, in July of next year. That's really close, relatively speaking. So where I stand on this, is outside of my confusion of the fact of why are you calling it Jurassic World, because you had the Jurassic Park movies, then you had the Jurassic World movies, and then they kind of like cross-pollinated a little bit, but it just seems weird that but here's my thing. In my opinion, there's some film intellectual properties that are good for a specific number of movies. And in fact, one of those is our main topic. One of the two movies in the main topic is Terminator 2. And I kind of feel like Terminator was something, and I don't know if this comes down to James Cameron, but it's like, it feels to me like there was like very little, there was fumes in the tank after Terminator 2. And I think that, some really cool filmmakers made, at least had some interesting ideas for Terminator 3, even though it was nowhere near as good as the first two. But after that, it just feels like it's beating a dead horse. And, and I feel like Jurassic Park's the same way. And the Jurassic Park's the one that I actually came to this conclusion of, it was after the second Jurassic World movie. I was like, you know what? I've been watching Jurassic Park since I was like 8 years old, whatever it was, 1993. So 7 years old. I would have turned 8 that year, but that was a summer blockbuster. So I was 7 years old. I saw Jurassic Park. Perfect age to see Jurassic Park, by the way. Because what 7-year-old boy is obsessed with dinosaurs and can't name you every dinosaur by name and spell it all out and everything, even though we all forget that over our lifetimes. But ever since then, I've been a fan of this series. But one thing I realized, I saw 7 years old, I saw the original Jurassic Park, and then it seems like every single thing that's come out since has been one level of a letdown since then. It feels like there were one absolute masterpiece movie and then just a shitload of like bad sequels that have come out to one extent or another. I mean, obviously some of the sequels are absolutely fucking horrendous, and some of them are like just a little mediocre, if not whatever. And so I came to a conclusion after the second Jurassic World movie where I'm like, you know what? Some of these things have just enough gas in the tank for X number of movies, and that may be different for every property. And there just comes a point when they're just beating a dead horse. And I mean, with Jurassic Park or Jurassic stuff, I mean, they still keep making money, it seems like. So I guess I'm wrong in some ways, because if it makes money, there's some people going out to see it. But I remember after the second one, I said, I'm done. I washed my hands of this. I'm like, I'm done with these movies. I'm not wasting my time and effort in these anymore. And then they tempted me, because the next movie, the third Jurassic World movie, they ended up bringing back the big three. Ian Malcolm, Dr. Grant, and Ellie Sattler from the original movie. Each of them would have their own little tiny spots. You had Grant in the third movie. You had Ian Malcolm in the second movie. You had Sadler in the third movie. And then whatever. Then the Jurassic World movies, there was some like cameos here and there, whatever. But then they brought all three of them back, and I was like kind of tempted to go see it. But then, as it came and like I saw some of the reviews, I'm just like, no, it's bad. So I'm just done. I've not seen a second to that movie beyond whatever they showed in the trailers. And even then I was mostly not paying attention. So when they first announced this, they announced it that David Cope would be writing it, and they're writing a new Jurassic World movie, and it's all new, it's all fresh, whatever. And I'm still kind of like meh. But I will say David Cope turned a little bit in me, and then Gareth Edwards as a director has probably got me up to at least a 5% of like, okay, maybe, because Gareth Edwards has done some great shit with King Kong. Some other stuff that he's done is great. The Star Wars stuff he's done has been great. He just seems like one that might be very well suited to a Jurassic Park movie. But still, I'm kind of like at a spot where I still don't know if I'm going to come back around to it. I guess my ultimate rule is I call it the Mad Max Fury Road rule, although it makes no sense for Mad Max because I don't hate any Mad Max movies. But I was going to go see Mad Max Fury Road anyway. But when it first came out, the reviews came out for it, and it was absolutely stellar. Like, it was like 99%, positive reviews on every fucking website you could find, whether it's the stupid Tomato website or Metacritic, all these ones. It was just universally adored by every critic. And I think sometimes, and I think like the Godzilla -1 was that way too. And I'm not one that sees every Godzilla movie, and I don't know if I would have gone and seen it had it not been for the reviews. And I think I always have that caveat then, like if this movie comes out and Gareth Edwards does it and David Cope and Spielberg, and they just fucking capture magic, and everyone's like, oh my god, this is like the best movie since the original, and it's getting like massively good reviews, like then I would throw it out the window and I'd go see it for sure. But they've got a lot of damage to overcome in my mind for me, because it's just like, what the fuck are they doing? I mean, I've read enough about the last movie to know that dinosaurs hardly had anything to do with it. It was like giant mosquitoes and like, I don't know what the fuck was going on. It was total dog shit though. So we'll see though. I went from a 0% chance of any interest in it to at least 5%, which is a lot considering the abuse that this goddamn series has put some of us fans through over the years with some of the shitty sequels. But Gareth Edwards, David Cope, like that's from something I would have said, you're never going to get me any kind of excitement for this series anymore. Getting me up to 5%, that's not an insult. That's a lot of praise. So I will at least be watching closely to see what ends up happening with this one. And I kind of at least hope that Gareth can pull off something really fucking cool and make it good enough for me to come on out to a theater and see it. So next up we've got, let me make sure I've got the right slide, which I do not. That's that one. That's okay. There we go. Next one. Sony is officially taking over Disney's physical media distribution. So this is so let me read this here. It says, going forward, Sony will manufacture, distribute, and market Disney's DVD and Blu-ray releases. That includes 4K, as well as other physical media. That means future Disney releases will still be available through physical and digital retailers. It's just that the studio is letting another company handle that side of the business from now on. This has actually kind of been happening. There's been a lot of shaking up in the physical media realm. There's Best Buy just exited the market. They don't sell physical media anymore. Walmart's been taking up the banner and doing a lot of work to keep the distribution stuff up for physical movies. Sony obviously has a built-in reason for it. I mean, they're obviously a manufacturer of electronics, so selling Blu-ray players and Blu-ray 4K players is part of their business as well. And I'm sure there's some sort of a kickback they get when people use their formats. So they obviously have skin in the game. In my mind, this is a really good news, because honestly, in the last number of years, probably this side of the Star Wars movies, Disney's physical releases have become absolute dog shit in general. They're just not good. I mean, some of them that we're seeing movies coming out that are getting remasters of old movies even, and the audio is shitty, the packaging isn't great, there's very little special features. So Sony is generally done a better job of it. So for them to take over Disney's realm, I kind of gives me hope that, one, that we'll see a better quality product, and two, maybe we'll see some movies that, when Disney was kind of phasing things out, they didn't seem like they had a lot of effort put behind the stuff. So things like Tombstone is owned by Disney. Tombstone's one that I want to see a really good 4K release put out. I still actually have not upgraded to Blu-ray because all the Blu-rays are so there's no special features. Like the DVD I've got that I've had for fucking almost 20 years has way more special features, and as well as the extended of the director's cut of it that has never come on Blu-ray. So it's I've never upgraded that one. So it's give me a killer 4K that has all the special features and shit, and I'll be there. And there's some other stuff too, but that's probably one of my most anticipated, or one of my biggest hopes for physical media is Tombstone, and Disney has had no interest seemingly in doing it. So cool, Sony, thank you. Let's get it going. Let's see what good shit you can put out there for us. Next up, the Crow reboot is actually been moved up. It is now coming out this summer. It is coming out June 7th, 2024. This is, of course, starring Bill Skarsgård, which recently, or not recently, in the last number of years, stepped into the big floppy shoes of Tim Curry to play Pennywise the Clown in the It reboot or remake, or movies, I guess, whatever, readaptation. And Bill Skarsgård is now stepping into the role of Brandon Lee in the starring role of Eric Draven for The Crow. This has been in the works, developmental hell for at least a decade, if not more. It is finally in the can, ready to be released here in a couple months. And I have a not a recap, but a plot synopsis, which will sound very familiar to any fans of the original amazing Crow movie. It says soulmates Eric Draven, Skarsgård, and Shelley Webster, FKA Twigs. I don't know who that is, are brutally murdered when demons of her dark past catch up with them. Given the chance to save his true love by sacrificing himself, Eric sets out to seek merciless revenge on their killers, traversing the worlds of the living and the dead to put the wrong things right. So I'm interested. I've not liked any of the Crow or sequels. But Skarsgård is an interesting actor. I'd be interested to see what he maybe has to do with it. But I do love the original Crow. We'll see what this one has in store come June. And then we also have the original Crow is actually getting a 4K remaster releasing for the 30-year anniversary of the original film, coming out May 7th, 2024, so a month before the new one comes to theaters. We'll be getting the classic one on a 4K remaster. Looking forward to getting that in my collection. I still have my original original DVD and my Blu-ray upgrade, which I actually just did not too long ago. So it makes total sense that they would do a 4K remastered, since I just spent money on a Blu-ray. I don't know, probably less than 3 months ago, something like that. But either way, whatever. That's more my fault. But I will definitely look forward to that one. Next up, The Boys Season 4 is debuting in June on Amazon Prime. I'm very excited for this to return. I have not watched any of the spin-off stuff, but the fourth season, I'm pretty excited to see what they have in store for us, so can't wait for that. And then let's go ahead and jump on into the Star Wars corner, which pretty much carries, well, we have a couple of things outside of the Star Wars after that, but we are getting close to the end of the news. I know it's been a busy news day. It seems like it's happening a lot recently. The first one here, Andor has wrapped filming, and then we've got a quote from Diego Luna. He says, "Today is the last day of filming Andor. Could not be more thankful to the entire crew for this amazing experience and years of hard work. More than 700 people have worked on this production, and it's impossible to say goodbye and thank you to everyone individually, which is why I write here, thank you for the love and wonderful experiences. See you soon." And that was on his social media. Then we have a quote from Tony Gilroy, which actually is interesting because it talks about the structure of this next season, which seems very innovative. Let's see what Tony says. He says, he says, when we come back later, it'll be literally like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then we'll jump a year, and then it'll be like 4 or 5 days, then we'll jump a year, and there'll be another 4 or 5 days, then we'll jump a year, and then be another 4 or 5 days. And he says, I don't know whether anybody ever did it before, because I don't know if anybody had a chance to do it before. We're in a brand new era of making these shows. The shows are all new. The whole idea is how to make these shows, and their economic scale of them is new, and everything is new. So it does sound like they're going to be jumping through a lot of freaking timeline in this last season of Andor, which makes sense because there's plenty of stuff to fill out as we get to or closer to like the Rogue One events, which is obviously the end of Mr. Andor. So yeah, it sounds like it's going to be like an episode or so, and then they're going to jump ahead in time a year, and then like whatever. So it feels like we're going to cut through a lot of timeline to get to that Rogue One thing here by the end of season 2, which is pretty interesting. Then next up, we've got Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection is coming to video game consoles and computers here in March. So coming up here very soon. This is the original 2 Battlefront games, and they're remastered, and they're fully functional with modern multiplayer, which does include the 64-player multiplayer that the original couple games had. I'm really excited for this because these games were fucking awesome. So I am super excited to be able to play these again. I had the EA access thing for a while at the tail end of last year, and I downloaded like the newer Battlefront, and it was okay, but it was just, I'm like, God, this is still not as good as the original Battlefront 2. And so I'm really excited that here, like, a handful of months later, they're announcing that those originals are going to get somewhat a bit of a remaster, and they're not like 4K PS5 level remasters, but they've buffed up the graphics a bit, and it'll be fully functional with all the multiplayer stuff. So that's really cool. And then let's go ahead and jump to the next one, and that is The Phantom Menace is returning to theaters for the 25-year anniversary. So this is pretty cool. I mean, it's insane that it's been 25 years since this movie came out. But it is coming back to theaters, which is awesome. I've advocated for years that I think Star Wars should just come back to theaters at least every 5 to 8 years, because I think every kid should have the opportunity to see Star Wars on the big screen. I remember back in 1997 when they re-released them in theaters with the kind of the George Lucas remasters. By that point, I had every frame of the original trilogy memorized on VHS. I had burned through 2 copies of of the VHSs that I'd worn out, and I was on the third copy, which I was well on the way of wearing out. By the time these movies came out in 97, I just remember thinking like, and not because of the remaster stuff, but I remember thinking that this is a whole different fucking movie, and it had nothing to do with the remasters. It just had to do with like seeing it on a fucking giant screen in full THX surround sound. Suddenly it was like I understood Star Wars way more than I had before, even though I knew every line, I knew every frame, I knew everything about it. But it was just a new experience. And ever since then, I've said that there's like certain movies that should be in theaters regularly enough that every child gets a chance. And I think the original Jurassic Park's the same way. I think every kid should be able to have that opportunity to go at a 7-8-year-old age level and go see Jurassic Park on the big screen. So pretty cool to see The Phantom Menace coming to the 25-year anniversary. And the big thing that hit me the other day at work on this was with The Phantom Menace coming to theaters for the 25-year anniversary here in May. I think I've told the story that the number one movie for me for theatrical experiences of all time is The Phantom Menace, with 19 screenings that I went to back in the day when I was 13? 13 to 14, because it was in theaters for a long time. So yeah, I saw it 19 times in theaters. That does not include any. I never go to dollar theaters. That was never my thing. I never liked the low end quality of the theaters. So and it wasn't my money either. I was a kid. But yeah, I saw it 19 times. Of course, the Dark Tower fan side of me is like, well, wait a minute. If I go see it again, then it's going to become 20 times. And 19 is a special number. It's also 19 is the day that I was born, September 19th. So there is a small aspect of like, oh man, I'm going to lose that 19 out of my thing. But at the same time, there is the round part of it where it's like, well, it'll turn into 20, or if I go see it more than that, I can get it higher than that. So it's very interesting that I'll have the opportunity. I think that it has been it did return to theater once before, but I think it was like in 3D, which I am never a fan of post production 3D. I think it's shitty usually, so I usually avoid those. So no talk that this is going to be 3D, so I'll probably end up going to see it and adding to my overall total for The Phantom Menace. The last bit of news here is a rumor that Tom Cruise is rumored to be in talks to joining Tarantino's final film, The Movie Critic. That's nuts, because obviously, you know, there's like giant fucking worlds that just exist in the universe of film, and some of them are just massive fucking planets, and it just feels like Tom Cruise is one of those, feels like Tarantino is one of those, and they've just, you know, it doesn't seem like they could even coexist in the same space. But it's an interesting idea, man. So we'll see if that pans out and if we see Tarantino adding Tom Cruise to the next movie. All right, so let's jump on over to the main topic, and that is Terminator 2 versus Aliens. And again, I think I mentioned it on the last episode when I announced this, that do not think for a second that when I say versus that I mean that I'm going to be able to come to any meaningful conclusion on which of these two movies is better, because that is something for the scholars. And someone as humble as me could never come to such a conclusion. 1 second here. Sorry if the audio changes a bit. I just had to turn the air on. It is getting a little warm. It's kind of that weird spot where it's like it feels fine for a bit, but then as time goes, it starts to get warm and stuff, and I don't want to be sweating it out here. But it's like weird. I would rather be like super hot or super cold, and I can just deal with it. But it's in this middle spot because it's been a very mild winter in Utah. So got to get the air going. But yeah, main topic: Terminator 2 versus Aliens. In my mind, these are fun ones. We actually did, which top 10s have we done now? We did top 10 action movies in January. It was the first episode of the year. And I remember debating these ones, but I eliminated them pretty quickly because, one, they are action movies in a way, but they're science fiction, right? You don't have Terminators, you don't have aliens and stuff. So like in real life, so it's like I usually peel these out of action as much as I can, because these are fucking ringers, man. Like if I included them in action, they would have been, probably number 1 and number 2 on that list of action films. So I love these movies. These are some of my biggest movies from childhood. I know I've talked about Terminator 2 being one of my Mount Rushmore things. Honestly, Aliens is so goddamn close. I mean, growing up, there was like I've talked a lot about my brother and my cousin that we'd have sleepovers and we'd go and rent the horror movies and shit and just like all kinds of like whatever. But outside of horror movies, there was just the go-tos that we would watch outside of horror movies was the Star Wars trilogy and it was Aliens, and it was Terminator 2. Those are the ones that were just like, if we weren't watching a horror movie, it was going to be one of those 5 movies. And you know, every once in a while there'd be some other thing thrown in there. Usually comedies after horror movies to chill us out, so we weren't freaking out too much. You know, because I wasn't desensitized like I am now. But Terminator 2, Aliens, those are ones I've seen countless times. Certainly Terminator 2 is probably the one that's a little bit more special to me. That's why it's on my Mount Rushmore. Whereas Aliens didn't make the cut. But both these movies are incredible. James Cameron did both of these films, which seems unfair. I do think that James Cameron is a cheat code, filmmaker wise, because it just seems like when you look at all these movies he's done, it's like it's just not fair. These 2 movies, outside of being James Cameron, they have a lot in common. Both of these movies are sequels. They're the second movies of their respective franchises. Both of these, the first movie was very horror. You know, Alien is is quintessential horror movie. Terminator, I've always said, over the last couple years anyway, when I had the revelation of it not too long ago, the last couple years, because I grew up watching Terminator 2. I didn't really dig the first Terminator much. It bored me a little bit as a kid. As an adult, I can appreciate it more. Because I saw Terminator 2 first. And I think I saw Aliens first too. So both of these I saw them first. So then the original movies I was never able to appreciate as much as a kid, because I expected what Terminator 2 and Aliens were stylistically, and neither of those first movies are anything close to the second movies. So I didn't dig them as a kid, but as an adult I've been able to really come to appreciate both of them. But I've come to the conclusion over the last couple of years that the original movie, The Terminator, is actually nothing more than a Halloween movie. You've got the Terminator is Michael Myers, Sarah Connor is Laurie Strode, and then Kyle Reese is Dr. Loomis. And I'm not saying that it's like a ripoff. I'm just saying that, like, stylistically, it's a fucking slasher movie. You know, it's just so happens that the Terminator doesn't really use a knife; he uses guns. But outside of that, stylistically, it's so much. And I say that in the most loving fashion. And if I would have been able to connect that in my brain as a kid, I would have probably actually been able to appreciate the first movie more. But for me, it was all about the second movies, Aliens and Terminator 2 as a young kid. Again, James Cameron, there's the similarity there, but also, you know, so the both of them, they're like horror movies for the first movies, but then both of them, as you move to the sequels, they end up becoming like balls out fucking badass action movies. Like, to me, Terminator 2 is like one of the most quintessential 90s action movies. Like, and I know I said earlier I don't count it as an action movie for my rankings because they're sci-fi. But I think that just in the overall sense, like, you feel like this is what an action movie is, right? There's like 100 million bullets fired. There's buildings exploding. There's fucking car chases. Like, yes, it's sci-fi because it's got a Terminator in it, but ultimately, like, it is a fucking action movie. And it's action to the gills. Both of these movies, I'm a music fan for film scores, and both these scores are incredible. Terminator 2's is a bit better. Brad Fiedel is one of my favorite film composers. He hasn't done a lot of shit, but the few things he's done is pretty incredible. And the Terminator 2 soundtrack's one I still throw on. Not soundtrack, but score. The Terminator 2 score is still one that I will throw on occasion because it fucking rocks and it slaps. It is amazing. It's one of my favorites. Then both of these, let's see, I guess, no, because then there's all the connections, actors wise too. So it's like you've got, Michael Biehn is in the first Terminator, and then in the second Terminator, he's in the extended cut, but he's not in the theatrical cut. Is he, right? No, he's not in the theatrical cut. And then you've got Bill Paxton is in the very beginning of the first Terminator. He's not in the second one, but then he's in Aliens, and Michael Bihn's in Aliens. So there's like some shared casting. I just blanked on his name. The guy that plays Bishop in Aliens is in the first Terminator movie. He's one of the cops in the police station that Arnold kills. So there's just like a lot. I mean, of course, it's James Cameron, so there's going to be some cross pollination because James Cameron. The other part of it that they don't match on is James Cameron did the first Terminator, but he did not do the first Alien. Alien is obviously Ridley Scott, and then they changed filmmakers to James Cameron, whereas James Cameron did Terminator, and then he did Terminator 2. With Cameron being involved in Terminator 2, and Aliens, you're going to see some shared cast across those movies just because it's the same filmmaker. We see that all the time. So but yeah, like, and that's the other part of it too, is the extended edition. I just mentioned it, like the director's cuts. Both of these films have director's cuts to where when you watch the originals, you memorize them because you watch them so many times. And then eventually, come the early 2000s, DVDs come out, and suddenly DVDs have the director's cuts, and they're things you've never seen before, and it's like, wait, what are you talking about? There's new scenes for Terminator 2 and Aliens. I will say both of them I absolutely fucking went gaga over in the early 2000s, watched the fuck out of the director's cuts multiple times, but then eventually came to the spot where I realized, like, I understood that James Cameron had made the right choices. For as much as a nerd as I love getting into it, the pacing of both movies is so much better in the theatrical cuts. But if you're a super nerd, the director's cuts are both worth watches because there's just extended scenes. Like, you see Newt and her family encountering the first facehugger in the extended cut. Kyle Reese is in the extended cut of Terminator. You see Sarah Connor right before the nuclear nightmare. She's having a dream, and Kyle comes into her room and tells her, like, hey, our son's exposed, like, he's out there, he's alone without you, he needs you. So that kind of is what inspires her. That and the nuclear dream is what inspires her to then break out. And it's just I'm getting chills thinking about the scene. I'm not gonna show it up on camera because it's one of my least favorite things on YouTube is when people are doing watch-alongs or reaction videos and they're like, oh, can you see my goosebumps? No, we can't, because the fucking light is flushing out your skin. Like, I can't see your goosebumps. Quit putting your arm up. So I'm not gonna do that, but it gives me chills because it's just such a fucking, like, and it's funny because, like, the first time I saw the extended cut of that, like, I knew Michael Biehn from Aliens, but I had never seen the first Terminator because I had tried renting it from Blockbuster at one point, and I fell asleep. It wasn't for me. So it's like Michael Biehn did not register for me as a Terminator character, but I knew him as, like, the dude I loved from Aliens, and, like, just they did so well from that scene that even standing alone without having seen the original Terminator, seeing Kyle Reese there engaging with her in the way that those two actors played, you could totally understand, like, the connection and the drive that she had for him and the desire she had for him. Even if you hadn't seen the original movie, I know because that was my experience. But there was, like, the emotion was all there. So then later on, years later into the, like, mid 2000s, I was finally got around to, like, watching and really appreciating the first Terminator. Then it's like, okay, now that scene makes more sense, but it's not that it lacked for anything. But there's just some, like, really cool stuff that both extended cuts have. One of my favorite aspects that was cut from Terminator 2 was the T-1000 malfunctioning. There's some stuff in the third act that doesn't really make a lot of sense in the theatrical cut. Yes, it's paced really well, but and again, I had seen the movies 100 times and I never really thought about, like, certain things. But, like, it's after the nitrogen freezes him, and then he rebuilds. After that, he starts to, like, glitch. Like, you see, like, the it kind of goes up, and I think you see that in the theatrical. But then there's one spot in the director's where he grabs, like a handrail that's like the black and yellow, like, coiled, like, curly design on it, and he grabs it and then he looks down and his whole arm up to, like, almost his elbow turned into that color, because it like transformed into that without him trying to, and then he pulls it and then he, like, whips it away, and then when he's looking like Sarah Connor, I don't know that he looks down. John looks down in the theatrical. I'm blanking because it starts to get to where it conflates in your mind. But when he's sitting there and there's two Sarahs, he looks down and the one's feet is melting into, like, that great metal grating, like that whatever, and looking like metal grating. So that's why he knows which one to trust and tells the other one to shoot. So, like, there's things like that's one of my favorite aspects because it makes it make more sense, I guess, and also it just feels just richer. Like, there's the T-1000 killing the dog. Like, we get the sense that we don't ever see it in the theatrical. It's just like, Arnold's talking to him on the phone. He's like, what's the dog's name? Dog's name is Max. He says, what's wrong with Woofy? And he says, Woofy's fine. And he hangs up on him, says, your parents are dead. In the extended cut, T-1000 goes out to the barking dog, which, again, as one that didn't grow up on the original movie, I didn't understand the fact that dogs can sense Terminators, so I didn't really get why the dog was barking. But then he kills the dog, doesn't really show it, but you hear the dog scream, and then he pulls up the bloody collar. It says Max. So then T-1000's like, oh shit, I just exposed myself. You don't really see that. So there's like small things like that, and they do break down the pacing a little bit. But like, if you're just a fan of the movie, and you know it inside out, it's cool to go in and see the different versions. The other one that I really think really should have stayed in, but I understand it kind of killed the movie's momentum a little bit, was the garage scene in the extended cut of Terminator 2. It's when they're taking the bullets out and all that kind of stuff, and the whole premise is that he's got like on his chip there's like a thing that like allows him to learn, but it's shut off, so they end up he tells him how to like pull it out, and then it turns into this fight where Sarah wants to smash the chip that would then cease the Terminator to exist, and she argues with John. He says no, you can't, like, and she's like, you don't know how hard it is to kill one of these things. And it's just a really, really cool scene. There's a scene where they're looking in the mirror as he's like, they're cutting into his head, and it was done brilliantly where like the in the mirror was really Linda Hamilton and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then in the foreground, which is the real world, it is actually a dummy, and then it's actually Linda Hamilton has a exact twin, identical twin, and she played the version that's back is to the camera. So it's like, it looks just like them in a mirror doing this thing, but it's like how they made it in real life is just insane. But I love that scene. There's just all these like really cool scenes. I'm trying to think of some of the other Alien scenes. I remember the scene at the beginning when Newt's they're going out to investigate something at is it Halley's Hope? I'm blanking on the name of the colony. But they go out to investigate something. They're looking off into the distance. Dad had gotten out of the little vehicle, and then Newt looks out and sees her dad on the ground with the face hugger on him, and she screams, and then it cuts or whatever. That's when I remember. I do remember the Ripley's daughter stuff is really cool. I'm getting chills thinking about that one. Because again, the premise of the movie is that she was in whatever hypersleep or whatever it was. She's frozen essentially, but then she overshoots where she was supposed to link up with whoever, and she's basically been floating out in there for 57 years, I think is what it is. So and there's one scene where she's talking to Burke, and they aged the fuck out of Sigourney Weaver, made her look like a 90-year-old woman. And then they show the picture, and she's like, oh, and he's like, oh, who's that? He's like, oh, that's my daughter. She died like 6 years ago of like leukemia or whatever it was. And so it's just this weird thing where it's like, oh yeah, like you're Ripley, you look that young, and your daughter looks like a 90-year-old woman that died because you've been out in space forever or whatever it was. So that's a really cool scene. There's like a whole scene set up where they're like setting up the turrets when they're like when they had set up that one area and they had like it all locked down, and then of course the aliens come through like the ventilation stuff, but they had like the halls and they had like these like turrets set up, and it shows like the turret shooting, and it's like, oh well, the aliens, they're stopping, they're not coming this way anymore because they see that the turrets are there. There's like scenes like that. I'm a little bit less familiar with the Aliens one. I probably watched the Aliens director's cut a little bit less, but it is interesting because James Cameron, I think in both cases, probably made the right choices. But if you're a super fan or even just a really big fan of either of these movies, I think it behooves you to check out the director's cut of either movie. But just with both of them, I mean, earlier, Mike, the first thing you said is game over, man, game over. Hudson is one of my all-time favorites, man. Bill Paxton is a fucking saint, and I mean, long before I ever knew Bill Paxton's name, I knew the name Hudson. He's great. The Marines, I mean, Terminator 2 is one of the more iconic things. I remember back in the early 2000s telling Peter when he and I were playing Halo for the first time how like it just felt like Halo was not really like ripping off, but it felt like a huge riff on Aliens. Like you had like the gruff, burly black sergeant, there's like the whole like loading up and getting geared up and getting lined up and getting into the drop craft that all felt like exactly from Aliens was the shit they were showing in Halo when they were setting the people up in the first movie and stuff. And there was like even some of the equipment looked like stuff from Alien. So I feel like it's more of a tribute or an homage, but it's just like so crazy because it's like so much of playing Halo is like, oh yeah, it looks just like the gun from Alien, or oh yeah, it looks like this from Alien or Aliens. So super iconic and super just I don't know, just influential, I guess would be the one to say. And then of course the other part of it is both things that they share is escalating. You know, the Terminator. There's one Terminator, and there's the Guardian that's coming back to help. But then the Terminator 2, there's two Terminators now. One of the Terminators is good, one of them is bad. Alien, there's one Alien, and then Aliens, there is a fucking whole hive of aliens. You know, the T-1000's obviously a massive upgrade over the Terminator. The Queen Alien is an entire change to the entire everything we had known about aliens up to that point. You know, when you watch the original movie, which again I didn't as a kid, Aliens was my way of knowing things. But like when you're watching it in order, it's like Alien, it's like, oh well, there's these eggs, and then the phase characters come out and they implant the embryo in the person, and it breeds in them and then bursts out of them, and then now you got an alien. And then Aliens looks at it where it goes, okay, well then where do the eggs come from? Well, that's where you get the queen now. And it's kind of a hive mentality. And one of my favorite, I mean, just action scene wise, when they go into that hive area, and you know the aliens are just like in the walls and shit, and you see a bunch of the people die, a bunch of the Marines getting killed all over the place. It's just terrifying. You know, Ripley finally going and saving the day, bursting into there. But then like again, I mentioned Michael Biehn playing Kyle Reese in the Terminator 2 extended edition. The reason that I was able to like lock onto him so much is because I'm such a huge fan of him from Aliens, because he plays Hicks, which is one of my favorite Marines as a kid. Was Hicks is one of my favorites. I mean, Hudson was funny. You know, like all of them had their different things. I always loved Drake too, because he had that big ass you know, like fucking waist mounted machine gun. They basically looked at it from the perspective of the way that was designed was steady cams. You know, they rig these cameras to the people where they have this big apparatus that keeps the camera steady, and so like as it moves, like the thing gyrates so that the camera stays smooth. But you know, James Cameron's idea was, well, look at that thing that attaches to you on the Steadicam, let's just like build a gun that would attach to that, so the guy's like, you know, mounting this giant gun to his waist and then hold, you know, I love that. I remember the action figures for Aliens. You know, and I remember the Drake one, because he had that big ass, you know, waist mounted machine gun, which is pretty cool. Love that, but I love the action scene there, you know, the acid blood. You know, Vasquez is awesome, and I gotta of course call out that Vasquez is the same actor that plays John's foster mom in Terminator 2, as well as Drake is the foster dad. So there's a lot of actors cross pollinating there, and some of those just don't jive. I remember seeing a meme a couple years ago where it showed Vasquez and then the foster mom, Janelle, Todd and Janelle, and it showed Janelle and then Vasquez, and it said, "Oh my God, my life's been a lie. This is the same actor." You know, she's I think she's a Jewish lady, which she looks a little bit more that as Janelle, but as Vasquez, she. You it would have surprised me to learn that she was just some you know, white Jewish lady and not a badass Hispanic lady in Aliens, because she played it fucking well. One of my favorite lines is when Hudson asks Vasquez if she's ever been mistaken for a man, and she says, "No, have you?" Oh man. But yeah, I love the supporting characters around too. Again, like all the different Marines, just they're all great in their own ways. As you get older, you start to see some of the other ones, like, you know, Frost and Baskey and some of these other Marines that as a kid I locked on to, like, oh, there's, you know, Hicks and Drake and Vasquez, and even Vasquez, I don't even know if I caught her name as much when I was younger. It was always more of just like, oh, there's the loudmouth, there's the quiet guy that kind of survives most of the movie, and you know, then Bishop, of course. But yeah, and then I also just found something on my social media serendipitously. I was reading the screenplay a couple years ago of Aliens, and you know, that was written or co-written by James Cameron. And when they're talking about Bishop, the whole point when she's freaking out about why is there an android on board, and he's asking about, oh my God, the android on your previous mission went after you. And again, I had no context of what that looked like in the first movie because I hadn't seen it, but I just rolled with the movie, right? But in the script, when she asks about, somehow it comes up, and I think that's Bishop that says it, but he says, oh, that was the Cyberdyne model blank, 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 whatever number, which Cyberdyne, of course, is the parent company of Skynet. So in the Terminator series, it's the Cyberdyne model 101 is the Arnold Schwarzenegger model. So that would have been an interesting thing if they had kept that line in, because they ended up changing the word from Cyberdyne to something a little bit similar but not the same. But I think that would have blown my fucking mind as a kid if they had actually said Cyberdyne in both movies, especially because you're talking about artificial humans. I will say, yeah, the third acts of both movies are absolutely fucking incredible. For Aliens, like when you're in that third act, once they get that self-destruct sequence going, like I believe it's real time, so it's like 15 minutes. The building will, or this installation will self-destruct in 15 minutes, and it's just the klaxon alarm going off. I believe that's real timed, or if you actually time it from when she triggers it, it is literally 15 minutes until it actually blows, which is always really fucking cool when they do that. But there's just all kinds of crazy shit going on. She has to like go back for Newt, and then when they finally get up there, like Bishop's taking the ship off, so it's like, oh my god, he betrayed us, and it just feels like my heart is just like pumping just thinking about like how brilliantly that third act plays out. Bishop, of course, then after they get off the installation, the Queen sneaks onto the ship. Then you have that whole battle at the end with the loader, which I loved the loader. It's one of my favorite parts. When I was a kid, I always wanted one of those things. And then the Terminator, I mean, when you get to that tail end after they blow up the shit at the Skynet stuff with Dyson. Everything past that is just insane. One of my, I love that lobby scene when Terminator's going out there with the gas and just popping dudes in the kneecaps, then, getting the van and going. But then after they get the van and they're running, then T-1000 gets in the fucking the helicopter and is chasing them, and they do some pretty insane stuff. There's one point when the helicopter goes under a bridge, and again, this is in the days before CG. Well, not entirely, because there actually was CG in the movie, but they didn't CG that helicopter. That was a real fucking helicopter that someone flew under a goddamn bridge, which just makes my certain parts of me tighten up in nervousness, because I couldn't imagine what that pilot would be going through in such a risky filming scene. But it came out with a badass thing. Also, one of my favorite things I didn't realize until the DVD era, I don't know how I missed it, I probably just wasn't paying that close of attention, but in the helicopter, one of the helicopter scenes, or a couple of the helicopter scenes, T-1000 actually has 3 arms. It's when he's got that fucking submachine gun, and he's flying the helicopters. There's one point when the one arm is holding the control stick on the helicopter, while the other 2 hands are reloading that machine gun as he's shooting out of the front of the helicopter. It's one of those things that, like, if you're not really watching, it's easy to just overlook and go, oh, there's whatever. It's just him shooting out the window. But I remember when I finally saw it, and it hit me on a DVD where I was like, wait a minute. I paused it, rewound it. I'm like, is there fucking 3 arms on him? And yes, there absolutely is, which totally makes sense of the T-1000, right? He's, kind of a shapeshifter and that kind of stuff. Also, I mentioned in the extended edition, Linda Hamilton having the twin, because obviously there's the security guard at the mental hospital, which they obviously cast twins. So when he turns around behind him and T-1000's there, is his exact duplicate. That's 2 twins basically, which is always cool. So there's a couple twins involved in that movie. And of course, at their core, both movies, you got 2 of the most badass women in sci-fi. You've got Sarah Connor, you've got Ripley, and then you've got, of course, on the other the outside of that, in my mind, you've also have Princess Leia, and then you've got Laurie Strode. That's like the 4, quartet of badass women for me. The ones I really loved growing up, and I grew up on. So. But yeah, just like, and one of my favorite stories about Aliens, and because James Cameron can come off like an asshole to some people, but the dude is just fucking confident. He knows that he is a fucking badass. I think he just has and does, and I don't know how long he's had that, but he certainly has. Because one of my favorite stories about Aliens is he came in to pitch the sequel to Alien, and he was going to do Aliens, of course, which he didn't know that at the time, but he came in to pitch them. And he gives them the pitch of whatever he had, and they had a whiteboard up, or board of some kind up, that just said Alien. And he gives them their pitch, and they're like, oh yeah, whatever. Like, do you have any idea for the title that you'd want to call it? And he stands up, goes over to the board, and I don't know what kind of board it was, so I don't know if it's a marker or chalk, whatever. And he just writes an S behind Alien, and then 2 lines to make it a $sign, and he just throws it down whatever he was writing with, and then that's it, ball game. The way the story goes, then he walks out, and it's like there's the fucking title, Aliens, and he puts $sign. He made the S a $sign because he knew, like, we're gonna fucking print money with this movie. So yeah, he's just a badass. Obviously we talked, I think, on this show sometime last year about how Arnold was talking about, his idea was he wanted Terminator to outkill, Sylvester Stallone, I think, had the highest body count, and those two had obviously a huge competition between them in the 80s, and he wanted to top what Stallone had recently hit the record for, and James Cameron's like, no, you're not killing anyone, you're a good guy, and Arnold was kind of pissed about it, but then he's like, in retrospect, Arnold's like, obviously I was fucking wrong, because it was such a better movie the way it was than it would have been if it had just been me massacring people the whole movie. As well as, I guess, the other part of it is John Connor and Newt. You've got 2 children. I think that's the thing that may have resonated with me as a young kid too. Is both cases you kind of have someone you can kind of put yourself into a little bit. I mean, there's always the aspirational things of, oh, I'm fucking Drake with that giant fucking gun attached to my waist and stuff, or whatever. But there is just an element of like familiarity. Like, John was a little bit older than I would have been watching it. I was probably 6 or 7 or whatever, and he's close to double that age. He's 13 or something like that, 13, 14. So not double, but close. And so he was a little bit older than me. Newt was closer to my age. Of course, she's a girl, I'm not, so there was that element. But I think that adds something to it, to where a kid can lock onto it a little bit more, because you can at least, there's somebody there that kind of fits you a little bit. So that's also a thing they both share. Mike in the chat says, what makes both movies great? What makes both movies great is that both are possible. A more advanced species could threaten the survival of humanity, and AI, especially now, could threaten the survival of humanity. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's definitely great in the timely fashion. If you would have told me, 30 years ago, young little Tad watching, I certainly would have never said that Terminators could be possible, but that now seems way more realistic. Aliens, of course, I would have believed in, but yeah, it's definitely something that feels more and more real now. Which is kind of interesting to me, because I don't know where they're at with the Terminator franchise, but it feels like now is almost the best time to make a Terminator movie of some kind, because it's just becoming more and more real, more realistic. But yeah, and again, so like when I said earlier, I couldn't come up with the which of these two I love better, or love more, which one's better. Because, and again, I know I kind of have, because Terminator's on my Mount Rushmore and Aliens is not. But I will say I also watched Terminator 2 a hell of a lot more as a kid. I watched Aliens plenty, but if I actually had a calculator of some kind that could show me, I guarantee you the T2 number would be a lot higher. So that's part of it. But also there's just like, and I've already talked about it in the previous episode, so I won't go into it too deep, but Terminator 2 is a huge movie for me. It's one of my most influential movies. I remember going to school dressed as a Terminator, got like a little jacket and had my hair spiked and glasses, and I was able to bring like a model gun because it was the 1990s and things aren't nearly as batshit crazy as they are now. Of course, kids can never get away with that now. I don't think they could bring a super soaker to schools now. But and mine wasn't like anything that looked super realistic, but it was enough for me to put the gun, like the gun toy thing on my shoulder, and feel like more of a Terminator. So Terminator was just always a big one for me, even though I did love and adore Aliens and still do. I would say intensity. The stuff with Aliens, I think gets a little bit more intense. Like the scene when they're in the room locked up and they have the motion tracker, and 25 meters and 10 meters and 6 meters. Like, dude, that can't be right. You're not reading it right. That would be inside the room. And they of course go up into the ceiling, and that's where all the aliens are coming. So, that the whole thing, just the beeping of that fucking, motion detector thing is absolutely incredible. It's one of the, it just ratchets up the tension way more than anything that Terminator necessarily does. I mean, you certainly are scared of T-1000, but here it doesn't have that same like dread-inducing nature. I feel like of the two, I think Aliens kind of keeps some of the horror elements, not anywhere near what the first movie was, but there's a little element of horror stuff. I mean, I just don't think you can go into that nest that's just a fucking horde of aliens living in the walls and like, or not living, but like they blend into the walls and shit. Or when Newt's in the water and the fucking alien comes up behind her, like you just can't see those kind of things without being terrified. And I just don't know that Terminator 2 ever embraces that horror element that Terminator 1 had, hardly at all, if at all. It's certainly intense, again, like I said, when you see with T-1000 torturing Sarah Connor, shooting the finger through her fucking shoulder and all that kind of stuff, like, you know, it's intense, certainly, and T-1000 is not to be trifled with. You know, I guess the scariest parts would probably be when John's running from him in the mall early on, and then when he gets on that bike and he's trying to fucking start it, that's probably the biggest tension part with him, because like he's scary, he's humming for you, he's like whatever, but it just never felt as much like a horror. But that's probably the area that felt the most intense. Then he gets that bike started barely in the nick of time, and then goes, and then fucking T-1000's running like crazy. And then because Robert Patrick, I always have to pause because I just call him T-1000 forever. As a matter of fact, I caught an episode, or a clip, not an full episode, but a clip from The Sopranos, and Robert Patrick plays a degenerate gambler. And I remember when I watched every time I watch that series, I think, oh, there's the T-1000. He's a degenerate gambler now. But then he just runs, but he had like the football injury, so then he ran kind of weird because of a football injury he had in college. So it just almost makes him look more alien. You know, I don't know, just great stuff. The way it all builds, the action, you know, once they go into that building to blow up the whole place and destroy all the stuff, and then shoot out with the cops, running from T-1000, getting to the foundry, crashing, you know, T-1000 gets frozen, they're running through the foundry, then you finally break him down. Of course, then the emotional side of it too, you know, the not self-destruct, because he can't self-destruct, but, you know, Sarah killing the Terminator at the end by lowering him into the steel. You know, that shit just tears at your heart, especially young little Tad as a kid, because what little boy that age would not want a pet Terminator like John Connor had there? So for him to have to destroy himself, just heartbreaking, along with the music. And that's the other thing, is I can't remember actually if the extended edition threw that alternate ending in, or if that's just a deleted scene, because then there's the alternate ending, because the original ending is just like the highway in the dark type thing going. But in the one, it's either in the extended edition or it's just the alternate ending that you could select in the menu. You see the one version of the ending, which is like old Sarah Connor. They put all the old lady makeup on Linda Hamilton, and she talks about like, oh, the, you know, Judgment Day, 1987, like that was the day that, you know, fucking Michael Jackson turned 50, whatever. I got drunk, and, you know, then she's this little old lady, and she's got John's grandkid playing on the playground, and, you know, it fully put a fucking pin to where there never could have been other sequels. I mean, they probably still could have come up with sequels somehow, but it really didn't leave that open element that Terminator 2 did, that allowed more sequels to be made as easily. You know, I remember seeing that for the first time and being blown away. So yeah, it's just interesting. I think of all the movies that have like alternate cuts, not counting Lord of the Rings, I guess those would probably be up there too. But I think Aliens and Terminator 2 are two of my all-time favorites, when they have like the director's cuts. They're pretty great. But yeah, again, I can't. The other thing, as a kid too, I can't really decide which of these two is better, because they're both fucking perfect. In my mind, these are like perfect movies. They're like fucking 10 out of 10 type movies. But the other thing, as a kid, as you'd always debate, is some of the versus things, like, which is, I know I put in the title. But like kind of like there was always like the Alien versus Predator, which eventually ended up becoming movies. Not when I was a kid though. That was more when I was a young adult coming out of high school. But then you also had RoboCop versus Terminator. But then I always in my mind would like cross pollinate, and it's like, well, what about a Terminator that, you know, Terminator 2, the T-800 versus like going, like, what if he went into that fucking swarm in Alien 2, like, or Aliens, I mean, not Alien 2, Aliens, what if he went into that swarm? Like, how much, you know, could he survive? Like, if you loaded him up, if you let him go into that fucking cellar in Mexico and load up as much as he wanted, you know, what could he do against these aliens? You know, the aliens obviously couldn't kill him as easily as they could humans, you know, but with the acid blood and shit, like, you know, he's not going to be completely impervious. You know, it's just fun shit like that, where it's like, man, it's the shit as a kid where you just absolutely adore having those conversations and debates. Of course, I've already told the story. I won't go into it in depth, but I also remember watching Terminator 2 on Judgment Day on accident. It would have been summer break still. It was over with my cousin. We were watching it, and again, completely oblivious. Had no fucking comprehension that it was the day. I didn't have the date memorized. But it was just one of those things randomly. Rather than throwing in Return of the Jedi, we threw in Terminator 2. And then when he hit that scene, and they said the date, and I was just in my head, I was like, wait a minute, that's today. And then I freaking screen, we turn the VHS off because you don't pause as easily on those. You can, but it's easier just to hit stop. Ran outside to look for mushroom clouds because we happen to be watching it on Judgment Day. That's a lot of fun. Aliens, I'm trying to remember. I don't think I've ever done anything like Halloween wise as a kid for Aliens. Definitely did it for Terminator 2, but I don't think I ever did anything for Aliens. I don't think I would have had the creativity, but I remember all the toys. There was some toys for Terminator 2 that I remember, but I remember a lot more of the Aliens toys. I remember having like, a lot of the main characters. Like again, I had Drake because he had that big ass gun. Had Hicks, Ripley, Bishop. There was like a little air ship thing, but it didn't exactly match the movie because it had like this bubble on the back of it, and the whole idea was the bubble would be where you trap the alien and then you could like fly your ship with the alien trapped in there. In fact, my favorite little bit of trivia from that is that toy actually shows up in Star Trek Generations. That's the one where it has like the ribbon thing that like takes people out of like existence into this weird like whatever realm. And when Picard goes into the Nexus, he's at like a Christmas thing with the nephew or whatever that burned alive earlier in the movie. He finds out that there's a fire at his family place, and this little boy died. And so when he goes into the Nexus, he's like seeing this kid alive and well. It's Christmas, and at one point you see him in the background playing with a toy, and it's actually the fucking ship from Aliens. And it has like and again, it's like kind of looks like the ship from Aliens, but then on the back there's like a Y space cut out, and there's like a bubble it's like like a pill that's translucent that you then could put like your alien action figure in, and it always made me laugh that it's like, why is a kid from the fucking 24th century playing with a toy that I've got in the 1990s? Video game wise, I don't think either. I mean, I guess the alien horror game, like Alien Isolation, has been pretty fun. I've never played the Fire Team or whatever Aliens. I've thought about buying that one, but I don't think they've ever done a good Terminator game, unfortunately. For the longest time, you could have said the same thing about Aliens, but I think in the last 10 or 15 years, they finally released at least Alien Isolation that was really good. But it just felt like as a kid, man, like why? I mean, we had Super Nintendo back then, so it's not like they would have been great games anyway. But they did have some weird games. They had the Terminator 2 game at one point, because I remember it was really hard to get through the mission where you had to shoot through the fences on your motorcycle. That was really shitty. But it's just like, it just feels to me like, give me like the RoboCop game I'm playing. Like, give me a game like that where it's Terminator, man. And I'm just mostly indestructible, and I just got like a mission of some kind to play as a Terminator. It doesn't even have to, like, you open world to be awesome, but you don't even have to go as far as open world. But yeah, good stuff there. Mike says both are extremely quotable, both have an amazing cast, and both are huge parts of the cultural zeitgeist. Yeah, indeed. And I did talk a bit about the cast in general, but yeah, they just top to bottom great casting. Dr. Silberman in Terminator 2, Enrique down in Mexico. I remember back, 8 years ago, something like that, when Coke was doing the bottles that had names on them. And of course, I was never going to find a Tad. That's just not in the cards. It's kind of like Bart that couldn't find his Bart license plate. It was only Bort license plates. I can never find Tad, but I remember going to the gas station one day on my way to work, and I was like, oh, there's Cokes. And I was looking across the different things. There was one that was Enrique, so I grabbed that, and I post on social media. I'm like, anyone that knows why I'm picking this name, you're a real one. Dyson's great. That's the other thing. There's some deleted scenes of Dyson that expand him out a little bit more, which is pretty cool. But very quotable. I mean, I'll Be Back is from the original, of course, but Hasta La Vista Baby is probably one of the most iconic Arnold lines of all time. Game Over, Man. Just all kinds of crazy stuff. The knife scene with Bishop doing the knife thing on the table is great. I mean, Silberman is pretty hateable, but Burke from Aliens is one of the most despised motherfuckers of all time. In fact, for me, Paul Reiser is still not one I can trust. Whenever I see him in a movie, I'm suspicious that he'll betray the character and my main character, whoever it might be, because he was such a fucking scumbag in Aliens. It's funny too, because then the lieutenant in Aliens, I don't think I ever locked onto it as much as a kid, because what the fuck do ranks mean to me as a kid? I don't know what any of those mean. I remember the lieutenant was the guy that didn't really have much of a background. He had only done shit in simulations and whatever. But like then when you watch it as an adult, it's like, okay, so I kind of get it. He's brought in new. He hasn't had as much experience and stuff. But at the end, he kind of comes through, right? He ends up being kind of a real one at the end. Dies with Vasquez with the grenade, blowing it up to kill the alien in the freaking little thing. Horror wise, how could I not mention that fucking facehugger scene in the goddamn room with Newt and Ripley? Man, that's one of the most fucking horrific goddamn scenes. That may be one of the scariest scenes, even including the original Terminator and the original Alien. That fucking facehugger scene in that goddamn room, dude, that shit's nightmare fuel. Just that moment when Ripley looks over and sees those canisters on the ground empty. Just insane, crazy. I'm getting fucking chills thinking about it, because again, it's just fucking spooky as shit. Those little bastards are terrifying. Like, aliens are scary, but facehuggers, that's a fucking different level of goddamn scary to me. Of course, Terminators, there's an element of being scary, but I think I always put myself in the role of the Terminator in my head, so it was never as scary as like the facehugger or the aliens. So but yeah, infinitely quotable. Some of the most iconic movies of all time. James Cameron at his fucking finest. In my opinion, I mean, there's some other shit he's done that's pretty great, but for me, the beginning and end of fucking Cameron, when you're talking about Cameron, is these two movies. They're some of the absolute best in my mind. They're ones I'll throw on anytime randomly. If I'm just want to throw something on for a couple hours, like there's a good chance that Terminator 2 or Aliens will be very high on the list of the ones I'm going to end up grabbing, because I just feel like they're comfort movies that you can just watch anytime. Just good stuff across the board. Great stuff. And then, like, I remember talking about that even with someone around the time Avatar 2. He's like, oh man, it's been a decade, nobody's gonna freaking whatever. And I'm like, dude, two things. One, never bet against fucking James Cameron, because the dude just keeps making fucking killer movies. And two, never doubt Cameron on a fucking sequel, man. And I brought up Aliens and Terminator 2. It's like, you're telling me two of the greatest sequels of all time, you're telling me that you're gonna fucking doubt James Cameron with Avatar, the follow-up to one of the most profitable movies of all time, and it's a sequel, and it's a sci-fi sequel. Like, it just felt like it was, and honestly, Avatar 2 was fucking great as well, but it's like, of course, it's going to take some time for it to ever come close to living up to either of these two, but they're both good stuff, man. Just absolutely incredible, and I just wanted to pick these as the main topic so I could just basically go and geek out on these two topics, on these two together, because I feel like these two kind of do pair together in my mind. Obviously, as a kid, it was more just because they're two movies I really love. I don't even think as a kid I was like cognizant enough to realize that James Cameron directed both of them. And I don't know that I recognized like Todd and Janelle were, two of the Marines. I didn't recognize them. I would have recognized, I didn't watch Terminator 1, so I didn't recognize Bishop. There isn't a whole lot that, like, I don't think I really connected them outside of the fact that I just loved both movies so fucking much. Like, outside of Star Wars, these are Star Wars or horror movies. These were the top two go-to movies for me. So, then to grow up and understand it's one director and see all the connections they have and how much they share, how much there is some differences, but it's just kind of a cool thing to come of age and finally realize, like, not only are these two of the greatest movies of all time, but the same director. There's a lot of connective tissue between the two. And yeah, you can just, they're great. You can throw them on anytime. It's been definitely a pleasure to geek out on it, and I'm sure it's not the last time that either of these movies will come up in one way or another, because I mean, Terminator's already come up a few times over the course of this show. Terminator 2 I talked about in my DNA episode in the intro. There's also an episode where Peter interviewed me on Terminator 3. Trying to think, have we really talked about aliens much, actually? Is this maybe one of the first times we've really touched on aliens much? Screen franchise, looking through the old list of all the episodes we've done, and maybe this is the first time that aliens has really been talked about. Terminator's been hit a couple times, though, so pretty cool to finally talk about both of these together, because I do have them in kind of indelibly linked together. Even like I said, even before I understood why, I just knew they're two of my favorite movies of all time outside of Star Wars and horror movies. And then later on to realize like, oh, that like there's all kinds of connections too. So to me, they're two peas in a pod, man. Even and both of them to me outdo their original. I talked about going to see Godfather 2, one of the greatest sequels of all time. One of the things you could really judge a sequel by is a sequel arguably better than the original. You don't even have to say it is better, but is it arguably better? Can an argument be made? And I think that like Godfather and Godfather 2 could be considered better than the first one. Both of these are easily yeses. I mean, I'm not going to say everyone has to agree, but for me, I'll say T2 and Aliens are both better than their original movies. I don't agree with that on Godfather, but I do agree with that on both of these. So, and that's such a rare thing, man. There's very few sequels that, I mean, there's sequels that are good that live up to the originals, but to outdo the originals is pretty fucking rare. And both of these did it. So, great stuff. Very happy to talk about both of these. And like I said, won't be the last time. Terminator's already come up a number of times. Aliens, I'm sure will come up again at some point, because they're just great stuff. Good movies to talk about. So let me go ahead and hit the outro stuff, which is pretty much the email address, which I'll throw up right now. The email address to email the show is at tad@geekeryabides.com. Tad is TADD at geekeryabides.com. Send me something if you disagree, if you agree, if you have any show ideas, if you have any feedback of any kind, shoot those emails over, tad@geekeryabides.com. And then next time on Geekery Abides, in a fortnight from now on March 9th, 2024, announcing the topic for that episode, and it will be Dune Part 2. So Dune Part 2 actually comes out next week. So it's the week between episodes. That gives about a week for everyone to watch it. If you can't get out to it, that's totally fine. I just want to talk about it. I think we've talked about this in the beginning of the show, that we kind of like the idea of being able to kind of react to things that are fairly new. I do feel a little bit better about it since it's a week beyond the release date, but I'm really excited for this. It's one of my most anticipated movies of the year. It was one of my most anticipated movies of 2023, but then the fucking strikes ruined it and pushed it back. So, unfortunately, we're now having to wait here till March 1st for Dune Part 2. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. Cover a bunch of news as well, of course, but I do want to kind of, and I'll probably talk a little bit about the first Dune movie as well, because honestly, we haven't talked about that yet, and I probably will either tonight, or tomorrow watch the first Dune movie, so that's fresh in my mind going into the theaters next week to see Dune Part 2. And then, that will be the episode that'll be the episode next time on March 9th, 2024. Same time, we'll keep it right now for where we're doing it, same as today, 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time, which is 8:30 Pacific, or 8:30, I keep saying fucking Pacific. I don't know why. Nothing ever said Pacific when we were kids. It always said Eastern Time. Or maybe they did sometimes say Pacific every once in a great while, but it's usually Eastern Time. So that's 8:30 Eastern Time. We'll be back then. And then, Mike, thank you. Comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff on the YouTube side. If you're watching in the future, we do obviously keep the episodes up so you can watch them in the future if you're not watching live. But if you want to talk along, throw a comment in, respond to something, tell me if you think, Alien and The Terminator are better than the sequels. Throw that in the comments. I'll try to reply as much as I can. Sometimes I don't get onto YouTube very often, so sometimes it'll be I'm not immediate at my responses, but I will try to respond if you want to comment on it and stuff in the future. But if you want to join live, ring the bell for notifications. We come pretty much same time usually, every couple weeks, every fortnight apart. So 2 weeks from now, we'll be going live at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. If you do subscribe and and ring the bells for notification on YouTube side, it will tell you what time we are scheduled for the next episode. It'll tell you in your time too, so you don't have to worry about all the stupid calculations for where we're at. The great thing about the internet is it'll figure out where you're at, and it'll tell you what time it is for you when the episode airs. Next time we'll be talking that, as well as all kinds of whatever news breaks between now and then. Looking forward to it. Thank you, Mike, for joining. Thank you for the kind words. We'll sign off as we always do by saying, let your geek flag fly high. To hell with anyone that wants to tell you that something is a guilty pleasure. Love what you love, and just enjoy whatever you want to enjoy. All right. See you guys in a fortnight. All right. Thank you, Mike, for joining on the chat side. It's always fun to have you chatting along. And yeah, it looks like you're as much of a fan on these as I am, so it's always fun to chat about some nerdy shit. And yeah, it's good stuff. I'm surprised it's taken this long to hit Aliens. It's great stuff. So thank you, and I will see you in a fortnight for episode wow, where are we at now? 29 is the next episode. So I'll see you then. See you in a couple weeks.